Have you ever found yourself scrolling through YouTube at 2 a.m. looking for something to help you drift off to sleep, only to stumble upon a 40-minute video about the hidden connections between Family Guy episodes? Well, you're not alone, and today we're diving deep into the surprisingly intricate world of Family Guy lore that has somehow become the internet's favorite bedtime story. From the mysterious timeline inconsistencies that have puzzled fans for decades, to the dark theories that lurk beneath Seth MacFarlane's seemingly random humor, we're about to explore why this animated sitcom has developed one of the most dedicated and analytical fan bases in television history. Picture this. It's Sunday night, you've got work tomorrow, but instead of getting some rest, you find yourself 3 hours into a rabbit hole about whether Stewie Griffin can actually time travel or if it's all in his imagination. Sound familiar? The phenomenon of Family Guy lore videos has taken over late-night YouTube, creating an entire subgenre of content that combines nostalgic comfort with mind-bending analysis. These aren't just random observations either. We're talking about carefully crafted theories that connect episodes from different seasons, analyze character development arcs that span decades, and uncover Easter eggs that the writers probably forgot they even included. Let's start with the foundation of Family Guy lore, the Griffin family timeline. Now, you might think that a show about a talking baby and a dog with a novel would be pretty straightforward, but you'd be wrong. The series has been on the air since 1999, with that infamous cancellation and resurrection period, and during that time, the characters have somehow managed to travel through time, and exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Peter Griffin has held dozens of jobs, died multiple times, and somehow always returns to his position at the brewery as if nothing happened. This isn't lazy. It's actually part of a larger narrative structure that treats continuity more like a suggestion than a rule. The real complexity begins when you start tracking the relationships between characters across seasons. Take Cleveland Brown, for example. He starts as Peter's neighbor and best friend, moves away to star in his own spin-off show, then returns as if nothing happened. But here's where it gets interesting. Eagle-eyed fans have noticed subtle changes in his personality and relationships that suggest the Cleveland who returned isn't quite the same person who left. This has led to theories about parallel dimensions, simulation theory, and even the possibility that the entire series takes place in some kind of purgatory where characters are doomed to repeat similar scenarios with slight variations. Speaking of characters who've changed, let's talk about Brian Griffin, arguably the most complex character in the Family Guy universe. Brian started as the voice of reason, the intellectual counterpoint to the family's chaos. But over the seasons, he's evolved into something much darker and more complicated. He's struggled with alcoholism, had relationships with human women that border on the inappropriate, and occasionally displays knowledge and abilities that seem impossible for a dog. Some fans theorize that Brian isn't actually a dog at all, but rather a human who's been transformed or cursed, which would explain his human-level intelligence, his ability to drive, and his complex emotional relationships. The Stewie Griffin timeline represents perhaps the most intricate piece of Family Guy lore. Early seasons presented Stewie as an evil genius baby bent on world domination and matricide. His sophisticated vocabulary, advanced inventions, and time travel capabilities made him seem almost supernatural. However, as the series progressed, these elements became more subdued, leading to the popular theory that we're watching Stewie's intelligence and abilities fade as he becomes a more typical child. This regression theory suggests that baby genius abilities are temporary and that Stewie is slowly becoming a normal kid, which explains why his elaborate schemes become less frequent and his vocabulary becomes more age-appropriate. But here's where things get really interesting. The time travel episodes. Stewie's time machine has been used multiple times throughout the series, creating alternate timelines and paradoxes that have never been fully resolved. In some episodes, characters retain memories of time travel adventures, while in others, they seem to forget entirely. This inconsistency isn't accidental. It's actually evidence of a multiverse theory that suggests every major character change or continuity error is actually evidence of timeline splits and reality alterations. The show's approach to death and resurrection adds another layer to the lore. Characters die and come back to life regularly, sometimes within the same episode, sometimes across seasons. Peter has been crushed, exploded, and dismembered, only to appear perfectly fine in the next scene. Brian was famously killed off and replaced, only to be brought back through time travel. These deaths aren't treated as permanent consequences, but rather as temporary inconveniences, suggesting that the Family Guy universe operates under different rules than our reality. Let's delve into the recurring background characters who form the backbone of Quahog society. Characters like Herbert, the elderly neighbor, the greased-up deaf guy, and the various news anchors create a sense of continuity that makes Quahog feel like a real place with its own culture and history. These characters often appear in the background of unrelated scenes, creating a web of interconnected stories that reward observant viewers. Some fans have mapped out the social connections between these background characters, creating elaborate family trees and relationship charts that rival those of epic fantasy novels. The show's treatment of pop culture references creates another fascinating aspect of its lore. Family Guy is famous for its cutaway gags that reference everything from 1,980 seconds movies to obscure historical events. But these references aren't random. They often connect to overarching themes and character development. Peter's obsession with 1,980 seconds culture reflects his refusal to grow up and accept adult responsibilities. Stewie's references to Broadway musicals and classic literature hint at his sophisticated nature and possibly his future sexuality. These cultural touchstones create a shared language that binds the characters together while also dating the episodes in specific time periods. The geography of Quahog itself tells a story. The town layout has changed dramatically over the years, with new businesses appearing and disappearing, neighborhoods shifting, and landmarks moving around. This geographic inconsistency has led some fans to theorize that Quahog exists in a state of constant flux, possibly as a reflection of the characters' unstable mental states, or as evidence that the entire series takes place in some kind of dream or simulation. Religious and philosophical themes run deeper through Family Guy than most casual viewers realize. Peter's Catholic upbringing clashes with his hedonistic lifestyle, creating internal conflicts that occasionally surface in episodes dealing with morality and consequences. Lois's Protestant background and her complex relationship with her wealthy parents add layers of class and religious commentary that inform her character development. These spiritual elements aren't always played for laughs. They sometimes provide genuine insight into the character's motivations and fears. The show's handling of mental health issues, while often controversial, creates another dimension of character analysis. Peter's impulsive behavior and lack of consequences could be seen as symptoms of various psychological conditions. Meg's depression and social isolation are treated both as punchlines and as genuine character traits that affect her relationships and life choices. Chris's awkwardness and social difficulties hint at developmental issues that are never directly addressed but inform his character arc. Family Guy's relationship with its own cancellation and resurrection has become part of its mythology. The show was canceled after 3 seasons, then brought back due to strong DVD sales and Adult Swim reruns. This real-world history has been incorporated into the show's narrative, with characters occasionally breaking the fourth wall to reference their own cancellation. This metatextual approach creates a unique relationship between the show and its audience, acknowledging that both the characters and viewers are aware they're participating in a constructed narrative. The evolution of the show's animation style tells its own story. Early seasons featured simpler character designs and more limited animation, while later seasons showcase increasingly sophisticated visual techniques and more detailed character expressions. This technical progression mirrors the character's emotional development and the show's growing complexity. Fans have created detailed comparisons showing how character designs have evolved, often using these changes to support theories about character development and timeline alterations. The voice acting performances add another layer of lore analysis. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters, and subtle changes in his vocal performances over the years have been interpreted as character development cues. Peter's voice has become more exaggerated and childish, supporting theories about his regression into immaturity. Stewie's voice has become less posh and more typical for his age, reinforcing the theory that his genius is fading. Guest appearances and celebrity references create a complex web of real-world connections that blur the line between fiction and reality. When real celebrities appear as themselves, they often interact with the characters in ways that suggest the Family Guy universe exists parallel to our own, with similar historical events and cultural touchstones, but different rules and consequences. The show's treatment of social and political issues has evolved significantly over its run, reflecting changing attitudes and sensibilities. Early episodes featured edgier humor and more controversial content, while recent seasons have shown more awareness of social responsibility. This evolution isn't just about changing times. It reflects character growth and maturity, particularly in how the family members relate to each other and their community. As we drift off to sleep thinking about these interconnected stories and hidden meanings, it becomes clear why Family Guy lore has become such a popular bedtime topic. The show's seemingly chaotic structure actually contains layers of complexity that reward deep analysis and careful attention. Whether you're falling asleep to theories about Stewie's true nature, pondering the implications of Brian's human relationships, or trying to map out the Quahog timeline, Family Guy offers an unexpectedly rich universe that continues to surprise and engage viewers even after decades on the air. Sweet dreams, and remember, in the world of Family Guy, nothing is ever quite as simple as it first appears. What if I told you that the seemingly random chaos of Family Guy actually contains one of the most intricate and bizarre mythologies in television history? Tonight, we're diving deep into the strange, wonderful, and oddly comforting world of Family Griffin lore that will transport you to Quahog and beyond. Picture this. You're settling in for the night, your mind racing with the day's stresses, when suddenly you remember that Family Guy isn't just a collection of cutaway gags and pop culture references. It's actually a surprisingly rich tapestry of interconnected stories, recurring characters, and hidden depths that have been building for over 2 decades. And tonight, we're going to explore every corner of this animated universe in a way that's perfect for drifting off to sleep. Let's start our journey in the town of Quahog, Rhode Island, a place that exists in its own pocket dimension, where the laws of physics are more like gentle suggestions, and where a talking dog can have a Harvard education, while his owner struggles to remember his own name. Quahog isn't just any fictional town. It's a carefully constructed world, with its own history, geography, and cast of hundreds of recurring characters, who each have their own stories to tell. The Griffin family home at 31 Spooner Street serves as our anchor point in this universe. This house has witnessed more supernatural events, time travel incidents, and reality-bending situations than most interdimensional portals. The basement alone has served as everything from a torture chamber to a speakeasy to a portal to different timelines. Each room in this house carries the weight of countless adventures, and if these walls could talk, they'd probably have their own spin-off series. Peter Griffin himself represents something fascinating in the realm of animated characters. He's not just a bumbling father figure. He's a force of nature who somehow manages to survive situations that would destroy lesser mortals. His job, history reads like a fever dream. Brewery worker, fisherman, Renaissance fair knight, bodyguard, paparazzi photographer, and even, briefly, the Pope. Each career change isn't just a throwaway gag, but adds another layer to the mythology of a man who seems to exist outside the normal rules of consequence and reality. The relationship between Peter and his nemesis Giant Chicken, whose real name is Ernie, represents one of television's greatest ongoing feuds. Their battles have destroyed significant portions of Quahog multiple times, yet somehow the town always rebuilds, often in slightly different configurations. These fights aren't just slapstick comedy. They're epic confrontations that span years of real-time storytelling, with each encounter escalating in scope and destruction. The chicken fights serve as a perfect metaphor for the cyclical nature of conflict and resolution, playing out across seasons like a modern-day mythological struggle between order and chaos. Stewie Griffin occupies a unique position in this universe as perhaps the most complex character in animated television. His journey from would-be matricidal infant to time-traveling genius to exploring his own identity represents character development that most live-action dramas would envy. Stewie's inventions have literally reshaped reality multiple times, from his time machine that creates alternate timelines to his weather control device, to his teleportation technology. He's essentially a godlike being trapped in the body of a 1-year-old, which creates an inherent tension that drives many of the show's most interesting storylines. The relationship between Stewie and Brian forms the emotional core of much of Family Guy's deeper mythology. Brian, the talking dog with a bachelor's degree from Brown University, serves as both Stewie's best friend and his philosophical sparring partner. Their adventures together have taken them through time, across dimensions, and into the deepest corners of human and canine experience. Brian's struggles with alcoholism, his failed writing career, and his complex romantic relationships provide grounding for a show that otherwise revels in absurdity. The time travel episodes alone could fill an entire doctoral thesis. The show has established multiple timeline theories. From the straightforward cause and effect changes we see when Stewie prevents his own conception to the more complex multiverse implications of episodes where multiple versions of characters interact. The time travel mythology suggests that every possible version of events exists simultaneously, which explains how characters can die and return, how major life changes can be undone, and how the show can maintain its status quo despite earth-shattering events. Cleveland Brown's departure and return to the series represents something unique in television, a character who literally moved to their own show and then came back, bringing with him the experiences and relationships from that separate universe. This creates a fascinating metatextual layer where the mythology of Family Guy expands to include the mythology of The Cleveland Show, creating an interconnected animated universe that predates many of the cinematic universes we see today. The recurring characters of Quahog each contribute their own threads to this elaborate tapestry. Glenn Quagmire isn't just the perverted neighbor. He's a complex character with his own tragic backstory, his career as a pilot that's taken him around the world, and his complicated relationships with his family members. His house has been the setting for numerous adventures and reveals, and his interactions with the Griffin family have evolved from simple antagonism to a more nuanced dynamic over the years. Joe Swanson represents resilience and determination in a universe that often seems cruel and arbitrary. His backstory as a police officer paralyzed in the line of duty provides weight to his character that goes beyond his role as comic relief. The episodes exploring his relationship with his wife Bonnie and their son Kevin add layers of domestic drama that ground the more outlandish elements of the show. Joe's adventures, from his time as an undercover cop to his brief stint as a superhero, show that even in a world of talking dogs and time machines, human courage and determination still matter. The mythology extends beyond Quahog to include locations like the Drunken Clam, which serves as more than just a bar. It's a sanctuary where the male characters can explore their friendships and fears away from their domestic responsibilities. The bar has witnessed confessions, celebrations, and confrontations that have shaped the relationships between the core characters. Even seemingly minor locations like the grocery store or the church have their own histories and recurring storylines that add depth to the world. The show's approach to celebrity culture creates its own mythology within the mythology. The numerous celebrity appearances aren't just random cameos. They often serve specific narrative functions and become part of the show's internal logic. When celebrities appear as themselves in Quahog, they enter a world where the normal rules don't apply, leading to interactions that are both surreal and surprisingly meaningful. These episodes often explore themes of fame, authenticity, and the price of celebrity in ways that are both hilarious and oddly poignant. The holiday episodes of Family Guy deserve special mention in any discussion of the show's mythology. Christmas episodes don't just repeat the same themes, they build on each other, creating an ongoing narrative about family, tradition, and the meaning of celebration in a chaotic world. The Halloween episodes explore different aspects of horror and the supernatural, often revealing hidden depths to characters we think we know completely. These seasonal episodes serve as anchor points in the show's timeline, providing structure to what might otherwise seem like random storytelling. The show's relationship with death is particularly fascinating from a mythological perspective. Characters die and return regularly, but these deaths aren't meaningless. They serve specific narrative purposes and often lead to character growth or revelation. When Brian died temporarily, the impact rippled through the entire cast and fanbase, demonstrating how deeply these characters have embedded themselves in our collective consciousness. The fact that death isn't permanent in this universe doesn't make it less meaningful. It makes it a tool for exploring different aspects of loss, grief, and redemption. The musical episodes and sequences throughout the series create their own subset of mythology. From Stewie's elaborate musical numbers to Peter's various band formations, music serves as a way for characters to express emotions and ideas that might otherwise be difficult to convey. These musical moments often reveal hidden talents and desires, adding new dimensions to familiar characters. The songs themselves become part of the show's cultural impact, living on beyond their original episodes. The show's exploration of alternate versions of characters provides fascinating glimpses into different possibilities within the Family Guy universe. Evil versions, successful versions, and radically different versions of familiar characters show us that the people we know are just one possible outcome of countless variables. This multiverse approach allows the show to explore different aspects of personality and relationships while maintaining the core dynamics that make the show work. The animal characters beyond Brian add their own elements to the mythology. From Vinny, the dog who temporarily replaced Brian, to the various pets and creatures that have appeared throughout the series, each brings their own perspective on the human condition. These characters often serve as voices of reason or chaos, depending on what the story requires, and their interactions with the main cast reveal different aspects of the characters' personalities. The show's approach to education and intelligence creates interesting contradictions that add depth to the mythology. While Peter is often portrayed as unintelligent, he occasionally displays surprising knowledge or skills that suggest hidden depths. Lois's background in music and her various adventures show that she's much more than just a patient wife and mother. These moments of unexpected competence or knowledge add layers to characters that might otherwise seem one-dimensional. The recurring gags and references throughout the series create their own mythology of inside jokes and shared experiences. The chicken fights, the various ways characters fall and hurt their knees, and the countless cutaway gags all contribute to a shared language that longtime viewers understand implicitly. These elements create a sense of community among fans and add richness to the viewing experience that rewards attention and memory. The show's treatment of technology and progress reflects our own changing relationship with innovation and change. From Stewie's advanced inventions to the family's struggles with new gadgets and social media, Family Guy chronicles our collective journey through the digital age. The technology in the show often serves as a catalyst for character development or plot advancement, showing how tools and toys can reveal hidden aspects of personality and relationships. As we reach the end of our journey through Family Guy's hidden mythology, it becomes clear that this seemingly simple cartoon has created something much more complex and enduring than its surface-level humor might suggest. The world of Quahog and its inhabitants represents a unique achievement in animated storytelling. See, a universe where anything can happen, but where the core relationships and emotions remain recognizably human. The comfort we find in Family Guy's chaos comes from its consistency within inconsistency. While the plots may be unpredictable and the situations absurd, the characters remain true to their essential natures, creating a reliable foundation beneath all the mayhem. This balance between surprise and familiarity makes it perfect viewing for those moments when we need something engaging enough to occupy our minds, but comfortable enough to help us relax. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, let your mind wander through the streets of Quahog, where talking dogs debate philosophy, babies build time machines, and ordinary families navigate extraordinary circumstances with humor and heart. In this world where anything is possible, perhaps the most magical thing of all is that love and friendship somehow manage to survive and thrive despite all the chaos surrounding them. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the world of Family Guy, tomorrow always brings new adventures, new laughs, and new reasons to appreciate the beautifully bizarre journey of life itself. Have you ever fallen asleep to the chaotic sounds of Peter Griffin crashing through a wall or Stewie plotting world domination? Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre, twisted, and surprisingly intricate world of Family Guy lore that's somehow become the perfect background noise for millions of viewers worldwide. From the hidden connections between episodes that span decades to the dark secrets lurking beneath Quahog's surface, this is your ultimate guide to the Family Guy universe that will either help you drift off to dreamland or keep you wide awake, questioning everything you thought you knew about America's most dysfunctional animated family. Family Guy has been on our screens for over 2 decades now, and what started as a simple animated sitcom has evolved into something far more complex and layered than most people realize. Tonight we're going to explore the deep lore, the recurring mysteries, the character backstories that only dedicated fans know about, and all the subtle details that make this show a fascinating rabbit hole to fall down as you're trying to fall asleep. Let's start with the Griffin family themselves, because there's so much more to these characters than meets the eye. Peter Griffin isn't just a bumbling father figure. His backstory reveals a man shaped by abandonment, neglect, and a desperate need for acceptance that manifests in increasingly destructive ways. We learn throughout the series that Peter was adopted, never knowing his real father until much later in the show's run. This abandonment issue explains so much about his behavior, his need to be the center of attention, and his often childlike approach to solving problems. But here's where it gets interesting for our sleepy exploration. Peter's job history reads like a fever dream. He's worked at a toy factory, been a fisherman, worked at a brewery, become a bodyguard, tried his hand at being a country music star, worked as a private investigator, and somehow ended up back at the brewery multiple times. Each job change represents a different phase of the show's evolution, and if you're watching chronologically as you fall asleep, you can actually track the show's tonal shifts through Peter's career moves. Lois Griffin presents an even more fascinating character study for our nighttime viewing. She comes from the wealthy Pewterschmidt family, which immediately sets up this class conflict that runs throughout the entire series. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, represents old money, conservative values, and everything that Peter both despises and desperately wants to be accepted by. Lois chose Peter over her privileged background, but this choice haunts their relationship in subtle ways that become more apparent when you're watching with sleepy, unfocused attention. The really interesting lore element here is how Lois's musical background keeps surfacing throughout the series. She's classically trained, she's performed professionally, and there are hints that she gave up a potentially successful career to become a housewife and mother. These musical moments in the show often serve as brief respites from the chaos, making them perfect for viewers who are using the show to wind down. Now let's talk about Meg, because her character arc is actually one of the most complex and disturbing elements of the Family Guy universe. What starts as typical teenage awkwardness evolves into something much darker. The family's treatment of Meg goes beyond normal sibling rivalry or parental frustration. It becomes a systematic emotional abuse that the show initially played for laughs, but gradually reveals as genuinely harmful. The lore around Meg includes several episodes that suggest she's actually the most mentally stable and capable member of the family, which makes her treatment even more tragic. She's shown to be intelligent, talented, and capable of genuine empathy, qualities that the rest of the family either ignores or actively punishes. For viewers drifting off to sleep, Meg's storylines often provide a strange sort of comfort because they're usually quieter and more introspective than the main family chaos. Chris Griffin's character development follows a different trajectory entirely. While he's often dismissed as the dumb kid, the show's lore reveals that Chris has artistic talent, musical ability, and emotional intelligence that surpasses most of his family members. His relationship with his father is complicated by Peter's own insecurities about masculinity and success. Chris represents the possibility of breaking the cycle of dysfunction, which gives his character an underlying hopefulness that works well for bedtime viewing. But let's dive into the real star of Family Guy's complex lore, Stewie Griffin. This character has undergone one of the most dramatic evolutionary arcs in television history. He started as a genuinely evil baby bent on world domination and matricide, but gradually transformed into a complex character dealing with identity, sexuality, and belonging. The show never explicitly addresses this transformation, which creates this fascinating ambiguity about whether Stewie actually changed or whether we're just seeing different aspects of his personality. The time travel episodes featuring Stewie create some of the most intricate lore in the entire series. His future selves, his various timelines, and his technological capabilities suggest a level of intelligence and capability that extends far beyond what we see in regular episodes. These time travel storylines often involve quieter, more contemplative moments that are perfect for viewers who are trying to relax. Stewie's relationship with Brian creates another layer of lore that's perfect for our sleepy exploration. Their friendship transcends the typical pet-owner relationship and becomes something closer to intellectual partnership. They travel together, solve problems together, and engage in philosophical discussions that often serve as the show's more thoughtful moments. Their dynamic provides a consistent emotional anchor throughout the series' more chaotic elements. Speaking of Brian, his character lore is incredibly rich and often overlooked. He's not just a talking dog. He's a failed writer, a recovering alcoholic, a liberal intellectual, and someone struggling with depression and self-worth issues. His various romantic relationships throughout the series reveal someone desperately seeking validation and connection. His death and resurrection in later seasons created one of the most emotionally impactful storylines in the show's history, demonstrating how attached viewers had become to his character. The setting of Quahog itself deserves exploration in our lore deep dive. This fictional Rhode Island town has its own mythology, complete with local celebrities, recurring businesses, and a distinct culture. The Drunken Clam serves as a central gathering place where much of the show's male bonding and philosophical discussions occur. Mort Goldman's pharmacy, the local news station, and various other businesses create a sense of continuity and community that grounds the more absurd elements of the show. Cleveland's departure and return to the series creates interesting lore implications. His time in Virginia with his own spin-off show exists in the same universe, and references to his experiences there occasionally surface in Family Guy episodes. This interconnected universe concept adds depth for viewers who are familiar with both shows. Quagmire's character provides some of the darkest lore in the entire series. While often played for laughs, his behavior patterns suggest serious psychological issues and criminal tendencies. The show occasionally hints at a more complex backstory involving his father's gender transition, his military service, and his dysfunctional relationship patterns. These darker elements create an interesting contrast with his seemingly cheerful demeanor. Joe Swanson's backstory as a disabled police officer adds another layer of complexity to the Quahog community. His accident, his marriage to Bonnie, and his struggle to maintain his sense of purpose and masculinity after becoming paralyzed provide some of the show's more serious emotional content. His friendship with Peter, Cleveland, and Quagmire often explores themes of loyalty, acceptance, and adaptation that work well for contemplative viewing. The show's cutaway gags, while seemingly random, actually create their own form of lore through recurring characters and situations. Conway Twitty appearances, the various historical figures Peter claims to have interacted with, and the recurring joke characters all contribute to the show's internal mythology. These cutaways often provide brief mental breaks that can be soothing for viewers trying to wind down. Family Guy's approach to continuity is deliberately loose, which actually makes it perfect for casual viewing. Unlike serialized dramas that require intense attention to plot details, Family Guy episodes can be enjoyed independently while still rewarding longtime viewers with references and callbacks. This makes it ideal for background viewing or for times when you're not paying complete attention. The show's musical numbers deserve special mention in our lore exploration. From Conway Twitty performances to elaborate Broadway-style productions, these musical interludes often serve as the show's most memorable and emotionally resonant moments. They break up the rapid-fire joke delivery and provide opportunities for character development and emotional expression. The various holiday episodes throughout the series create their own seasonal lore. Christmas episodes often explore themes of family, tradition, and redemption. Halloween episodes venture into horror and supernatural territory. These special episodes often feature higher production values and more elaborate storytelling that reward dedicated viewing. The show's treatment of religion, politics, and social issues creates ongoing lore threads that reflect changing social attitudes over the show's long run. Early episodes approach these topics differently than later ones, creating an interesting timeline of cultural evolution that can be tracked through the series' progression. Guest appearances and celebrity encounters in Family Guy often become part of the show's lore through recurring references and callbacks. These celebrity interactions sometimes extend beyond single episodes, creating ongoing relationships and references that reward longtime viewers. The various alternate reality and parallel universe episodes explore different versions of the Griffin family and Quahog community. These episodes often reveal character depths and relationship dynamics that aren't apparent in regular episodes. They also provide opportunities to explore what-if scenarios that add complexity to our understanding of the main characters. Family Guy's animation style evolution tells its own story about the show's development and budget changes over time. Early episodes have a distinctly different look and feel compared to more recent ones. This visual evolution creates a subtle timeline that longtime viewers can use to place episodes chronologically, even without checking air dates. The show's relationship with Fox Network, including its cancellation and resurrection, becomes part of its own meta-lore. Episodes that reference these real-world events blur the line between fiction and reality in ways that add extra layers for dedicated fans to discover and contemplate. As we wind down our exploration of Family Guy's rich lore landscape, it's worth noting that this depth and complexity is part of what makes the show so suitable for repeated viewing and background watching. There's always another layer to discover, another connection to make, another character detail to notice. Whether you're actively watching or letting it play, while you drift off to sleep, Family Guy's universe provides a consistent, familiar, and surprisingly deep world to explore. The beauty of Family Guy lore for bedtime viewing lies in its perfect balance of familiarity and discovery. You can watch episodes you've seen dozens of times and still notice new details, catch references you missed before, or simply let the familiar voices and situations wash over you as you relax. The show's episodic nature means you won't lose important plot threads if you fall asleep mid-episode, but its rich lore rewards those moments when you find yourself unexpectedly engaged and alert. Sweet dreams, and remember that somewhere in Quahog, Peter Griffin is probably about to do something that will somehow make perfect sense within the wonderfully chaotic universe that has been entertaining us for over 2 decades. Have you ever wondered why millions of people fall asleep to Family Guy every single night? Tonight, I'm diving deep into this bizarre internet phenomenon that's taken over bedrooms worldwide. We're talking about random Family Guy episodes specifically curated for sleep, and trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why this animated chaos has become the ultimate sleep soundtrack for an entire generation. Before we jump into this rabbit hole, let me ask you something. How many of you have tried falling asleep to complete silence, only to find your brain racing with thoughts? Or maybe you've attempted those boring nature sounds that somehow make you feel more awake than relaxed. Well, you're not alone. And that's exactly where our story begins. The Family Guy sleep phenomenon isn't just some random internet trend. It's a psychological masterpiece that accidentally stumbled upon the perfect formula for shutting down an overactive mind. Think about it. When you're lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, what's your biggest enemy? Your own thoughts. Your brain wants to replay every embarrassing moment from middle school, plan tomorrow's meetings, or suddenly solve world hunger. But Family Guy? It gives your mind something familiar yet unpredictable to focus on, creating the perfect distraction cocktail. Let me paint you a picture of how this whole thing works. You're scrolling through YouTube at midnight, exhausted but somehow still wired. You stumble across a video titled Family Guy Random Episodes No Ads Perfect for Sleep, with like 3 million views. You click it, thinking you'll watch for maybe 10 minutes. Next thing you know, you're waking up 8 hours later with your phone battery dead and Peter Griffin's voice somehow embedded in your dreams. The genius of Family Guy as sleep content lies in its complete unpredictability, wrapped in comfortable familiarity. You've probably seen most episodes before, so there's no pressure to follow. Along with complex plot lines, your brain can just drift along with the familiar voices and random cutaway gags without feeling like it's missing something important. It's like having background conversation at a party where you don't need to participate, but the noise keeps your mind occupied enough to relax. Now, let's talk about why random episodes work better than watching the show normally. When you're actively watching Family Guy during the day, you're engaged with the jokes, the storylines, and the visual gags. But when it's sleep time, you need something that provides just enough stimulation to quiet your thoughts without keeping you awake. Random episodes create this perfect sweet spot because there's no narrative continuity to follow. Your brain doesn't have to work to connect plot points or remember character developments. It can just float along with whatever chaos is happening on screen. The audio quality of these sleep compilations is crucial too. Most creators who make Family Guy sleep content understand that the volume needs to be just right. Not so loud that sudden outbursts wake you up, but not so quiet that you're straining to hear. They often remove the louder musical segments and focus on dialogue-heavy scenes. It's like they've accidentally created the perfect white noise machine, except instead of ocean sounds, it's Stewie plotting world domination. Here's something fascinating about the psychology behind this phenomenon. Sleep researchers have found that consistent, familiar sounds can actually improve sleep quality by masking disruptive noises and giving the brain something predictable to tune out. Family Guy provides this consistency through its familiar character voices and recurring joke structures, while the randomness prevents your brain from getting too invested in following along. The comment sections on these videos are absolutely incredible. You'll find thousands of people sharing their sleep stories, talking about how they've been falling asleep to the same episodes for years, or how they can identify exactly which episode they fell asleep to based on what they remember hearing. There's this whole community of people who've basically turned Family Guy into their personal sleep medication, and they're all supporting each other's weird sleep habits. What's really interesting is how this has evolved beyond just Family Guy. You'll find similar content for shows like The Simpsons, South Park, and even The Office. But Family Guy seems to have the perfect storm of elements that make it ideal for sleep content. The show's humor doesn't rely heavily on visual gags, so you're not missing much with your eyes closed. The characters have distinct, recognizable voices that create a comforting audio landscape, and the show's episodic nature means you can jump in anywhere without feeling lost. The creators of these sleep compilations have become masters of their craft. They know exactly which episodes work best, which scenes to include or skip, and how to balance the audio levels for optimal sleep induction. Some even create custom transitions between episodes to eliminate jarring cuts that might wake viewers up. It's like they're running a sophisticated sleep laboratory, except their test subjects are millions of insomniacs scrolling YouTube at 2 in the morning. Let's dive into the science behind why this actually works. When you're trying to fall asleep, your brain goes through different stages of consciousness. During the transition from wakefulness to sleep, your mind is particularly susceptible to intrusive thoughts and anxiety. Having familiar, low-stakes audio content provides what sleep experts call cognitive load distribution. Essentially, you're giving your brain something harmless to process, instead of letting it spiral into worry or excitement. The repetitive nature of Family Guy's humor structure also plays a role. The show follows predictable patterns: setup, punchline, cutaway, gag, back to story. This rhythm becomes almost hypnotic when you're in a relaxed state. Your brain starts to anticipate these patterns, which can actually trigger the relaxation response and help transition you into deeper sleep stages. But here's where it gets really interesting. Many people report having the weirdest, most vivid dreams when they fall asleep to Family Guy. This makes sense from a neuroscience perspective. During REM sleep, your brain is still processing auditory information, and the random, surreal content from the show can influence your dream narratives. People describe dreams where they're hanging out with the Griffin family, or experiencing bizarre adventures that feel like extended Family Guy cutaway gags. The social aspect of this phenomenon can't be ignored either. There's something comforting about knowing that thousands of other people are falling asleep to the same content. It creates this invisible community of shared experience. You're not alone in your weird sleep habits, because apparently everyone else is doing it too. The comment sections become these strange support groups where people bond over their favorite episodes to fall asleep to, or share stories about how the show has helped them through difficult times. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Is falling asleep to TV shows actually healthy? Sleep experts have mixed opinions on this. Some argue that any screen time before bed disrupts your natural circadian rhythms and that the blue light from devices interferes with melatonin production. Others acknowledge that for people with anxiety or racing thoughts, having consistent background audio can actually improve sleep quality compared to lying awake in silence for hours. The key seems to be in the execution. The most successful Family Guy sleep content creators understand the importance of audio-only engagement. They often recommend turning your phone face down or using the video purely as an audio source. Some even create audio-only versions specifically designed for sleep, removing any visual elements that might keep you engaged. What's particularly clever about the no-captions approach that many of these videos advertise is that it eliminates another potential distraction. Captions, while helpful for accessibility, can keep your eyes engaged and prevent that crucial transition into sleep mode. By removing them, creators ensure that once you close your eyes, you're purely in audio mode. The algorithm has definitely caught on to this trend. YouTube's recommendation system has become incredibly sophisticated at identifying sleep content and serving it to users who are likely to engage with it during late-night browsing sessions. This has created a whole ecosystem of sleep-focused content creators who specialize in curating the perfect bedtime entertainment. The timing of when people discover this content is usually pretty consistent. It typically happens during periods of high stress, major life changes, or when dealing with insomnia. College students preparing for finals, people going through breakups, individuals dealing with work stress, or anyone experiencing major life transitions often find themselves searching for ways to quiet their minds at bedtime. There's also something to be said about nostalgia playing a role in this phenomenon. Family Guy has been on the air for over 2 decades, which means many of the people using it for sleep content grew up with the show. There's a comfort in those familiar voices and jokes that connects to childhood feelings of safety and routine. It's like having a weird, inappropriate bedtime story that somehow works perfectly for adult anxieties. The production quality of these sleep compilations has evolved significantly over the years. Early versions were often just random episode uploads with inconsistent audio levels and jarring transitions. Now, you'll find carefully curated content with smooth transitions, optimized audio, levels, and strategic episode selection designed specifically for sleep enhancement. Some creators even remove the most jarring sound effects or explosive moments that might disrupt sleep. What's fascinating is how this has influenced the broader landscape of sleep content on YouTube. You'll now find entire channels dedicated to creating sleep-friendly versions of popular shows, and the techniques pioneered by Family Guy sleep content creators have been adopted across different types of media. The success of this format has proven that there's a massive audience for familiar, low-stakes entertainment designed specifically for bedtime consumption. The psychological comfort provided by these videos extends beyond just the audio content. Many users report that having the video running creates a sense of presence, like they're not alone in their bedroom. This can be particularly helpful for people who live alone or are dealing with anxiety about being by themselves at night. The familiar characters become like imaginary roommates, providing background chatter. As we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Family Guy sleep content, it's clear that this phenomenon represents something much bigger than just a weird internet trend. It's a collective solution to a modern problem that millions of people face every night. In our hyper-connected, always-on world, our brains often struggle to shut down when it's time for sleep. These carefully curated random episodes provide exactly what many people need: a familiar, comforting, and just engaging enough audio landscape to help transition from the chaos of daily life into peaceful sleep. Whether you're already part of this strange community or you're curious to try it for yourself, remember that good sleep hygiene is ultimately about finding what works for your individual needs. For millions of people, that apparently involves falling asleep to the dysfunctional antics of the Griffin family. And honestly, in a world full of sleeping problems, that seems perfectly reasonable to me. So tonight, when you're lying in bed with your mind racing, maybe give it a try. Search for Family Guy random episodes for sleep and see if this bizarre internet phenomenon might just be the solution to your bedtime struggles. Sweet dreams, and remember, if Peter Griffin can fall asleep anywhere, so can you. Hey there, sleep seekers and Family Guy fans. Ever lie awake wondering just how many ridiculous jobs Peter Griffin has actually had throughout the series? Well, grab your pillow and get comfortable, because we're about to dive into the wonderfully chaotic career history of Quahog's most incompetent resident. From safety inspector to Supreme Court justice, Peter's resume reads like a fever dream, and tonight we're exploring every single bizarre position this man has somehow managed to stumble into. Picture this. You're at a job interview, and they ask where you see yourself in 5 years. Most people have a reasonable answer. Peter Griffin? Well, let's just say his interview skills are about as polished as his decision-making abilities. Yet somehow, this man has held more jobs than most people even know exist. Tonight's journey through Peter's professional mishaps is perfect for those late-night moments when you need something absurdly entertaining to drift off to. Let's start with what might be considered Peter's most stable employment, though that's not saying much. His original gig as a safety inspector at the happy-go-lucky toy factory sounds straightforward enough. Stand around, inspect toys, make sure they're safe for children. Simple, right? Wrong. This is Peter Griffin we're talking about. Even the most basic task becomes an opportunity for spectacular failure. The man whose job it was to ensure toy safety somehow found ways to make everything less safe just by being there. From toy inspection, Peter moved on to what became his longest-running employment adventure, working at the Pawtucket Brewery. Now, there's something almost poetic about Peter working at the place where his beloved Pawtucket Patriot Ale is crafted. It's like a beer enthusiast getting a job at their favorite brewery, except instead of bringing passion and expertise to the role, Peter brought his unique talent for turning any situation into chaos. On his very first day, he managed to get drunk during work hours, setting the tone for what would become years of questionable workplace behavior. The medical field has also been graced by Peter's presence, though patients probably weren't thrilled about it. During a citywide flu outbreak, when the hospital was desperately short-staffed, Peter volunteered as a nurse. This might seem noble until you discover his approach to medical care. Turns out, Peter had been faking his way through nursing duties because he was afraid of needles. Imagine being sick in the hospital and finding out your nurse has been pretending to give you medication because he's squeamish about basic medical equipment. But Peter's medical career didn't end with nursing. He somehow also worked as a doctor, which raises serious questions about the hospital's hiring practices. His approach to emergency medicine was about as effective as you'd expect. When someone's life hung in the balance, Peter's solution involved methods that would make actual medical professionals question their career choices. Law enforcement has also experienced the Peter Griffin effect. In one memorable stint, he became a sheriff in a small southern town after the Griffin family was relocated by the FBI. The job description perfectly matched Peter's skill set: hang out, eat pie, and get drunk. For once, Peter had found employment that aligned with his natural abilities. Of course, even the simplest law enforcement duties became complicated when filtered through Peter's unique worldview. His artistic side emerged when he worked as a police sketch artist. While most people struggled with Peter's unconventional artistic interpretations, his sketches turned out to be surprisingly accurate. Sometimes, raw talent manifests in the most unexpected ways, even when that talent belongs to someone who approaches every task with the subtlety of a freight train. Peter has also dabbled in hospitality, working as a motel housekeeper. His customer service approach involved inserting himself into situations where he absolutely wasn't welcome, demonstrating a complete lack of understanding about personal boundaries and professional behavior. Guests probably didn't expect their housekeeper to become an active participant in their private moments. The detective business got a taste of Peter's investigative skills when he worked as a private investigator. His noir-style internal monologue painted him as a hard-boiled detective struggling to make ends meet, but his actual investigative methods were about as sophisticated as his approach to everything else. Still, there's something charming about Peter's attempt to channel classic detective fiction, even if the execution left much to be desired. Peter's relationship with food has led to several career opportunities. He became president of the National Association for the Advancement of Fat People, turning his personal struggles with weight into a leadership role. This position actually led to some heroic moments, proving that even Peter's most self-serving endeavors can occasionally produce positive outcomes. The fishing industry experienced Peter's unique management style when he decided to become a professional fisherman. Despite having zero experience on the water, Peter approached commercial fishing with his characteristic confidence. His nautical adventures proved that enthusiasm alone isn't enough to master the complexities of maritime work, especially when that enthusiasm is accompanied by a complete lack of relevant skills. Agriculture also felt Peter's impact when he tried his hand at farming. Moving the family to the countryside for a simpler life seemed like a reasonable plan until reality set in. Farming requires knowledge, patience, and hard work, qualities that don't align with Peter's approach to life. The fact that they failed to grow a single sellable crop shouldn't surprise anyone familiar with Peter's track record. Education has been both blessed and cursed by Peter's involvement. He served as an interim principal at James Woods High, stepping in during a staffing crisis. While his administrative methods were unconventional, he did manage some positive moments, like standing up to bullies. However, his interpretation of appropriate principal behavior included outdated social media challenges and questionable disciplinary approaches. Peter also won a campaign to become school board president, though his victory came through a smear campaign against his own wife. His tenure in educational leadership was marked by the same chaos that characterizes all his endeavors, proving that putting Peter in charge of anything, especially children's education, requires a level of optimism that borders on delusion. The restaurant business has provided Peter with multiple opportunities to combine his love of food with his entrepreneurial spirit. He and Lois opened Big Pete's House of Munch, using money from a valuable coin they discovered. Restaurant ownership taught Peter that loving food and successfully serving it to customers are entirely different skills. The establishment struggled from day one, with Peter's customer service philosophy clashing with basic business principles. Not content with traditional restaurants, Peter also operated a food truck called Eat My Junk. His mobile food service brought his unique culinary vision directly to the streets, complete with creative payment processing methods that probably violated several health and business regulations. The food truck experiment demonstrated that changing venues doesn't necessarily improve outcomes when the fundamental approach remains chaotic. Environmental activism became Peter's focus when he created Gary, the no-trash cougar, a character designed to combat pollution. His environmental education methods were somewhat traumatic for young audiences, proving that good intentions don't automatically translate to effective execution. Sometimes the message gets lost when the messenger approaches their mission with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Law enforcement experienced Peter's unique perspective again when he volunteered as a cop during a staffing shortage. Giving Peter police powers was probably one of Quahog's more questionable decisions. His interpretation of police work involved creative approaches to evidence handling and suspect interaction that would make actual officers reconsider their career choices. Corporate leadership has also been shaped by Peter's influence. When he temporarily took over as CEO of his father-in-law's company, his business philosophy involved firing experienced executives and replacing them with his drinking buddies. His product development ideas were equally revolutionary, though perhaps not in ways that traditional business schools would recommend. The tobacco industry briefly benefited from Peter's advocacy when he served as president of El Dorado Cigarette Company. His approach to corporate leadership in this role was refreshingly straightforward: show up, sit in the office, and use his position to influence legislation. Sometimes the simplest job descriptions are the most honest. Political service has called upon Peter's talents multiple times. He worked as a press secretary, though his duties seemed to focus more on preventing static electricity than managing media relations. His understanding of political communication was about as nuanced as his approach to everything else, which is to say, not very nuanced at all. The entertainment industry has provided Peter with various opportunities to showcase his talents. He worked as a Calvin Klein model at some point in his past, proving that even Peter's physical appearance has commercial value under the right circumstances. He's also appeared in television commercials, though his performance skills might not lead to repeat bookings. Military service appears somewhere in Peter's background, though his understanding of combat protocols and chain of command was typically unconventional. His military training focused on identifying friendly forces, a concept he struggled to grasp despite repeated instruction. Telecommunications offered Peter work in telemarketing, though his target demographic was somewhat specialized. His phone skills were about as effective as you'd expect, with customer interaction following his usual pattern of creating confusion where none previously existed. Medical experimentation provided Peter with income opportunities when he volunteered for various research studies. The compensation was decent, though the side effects of participating in multiple experiments simultaneously probably weren't covered in the consent forms. He definitely didn't read carefully. The hospitality industry experienced Peter's customer service philosophy when he worked various service positions. His approach to taking orders involved creative interpretations of restaurant terminology that probably confused both customers and kitchen staff. His ability to remember and accurately communicate simple requests was challenged by his tendency to overcomplicate straightforward interactions. Emergency services have been both helped and hindered by Peter's involvement. His stint as a firefighter demonstrated that good intentions and basic safety training don't always combine effectively. Sometimes the person meant to solve the problem becomes part of the problem, especially when that person approaches emergency response with Peter's unique logic. Entertainment production has benefited from Peter's creative vision. He developed television programming with the same innovative approach he brings to everything else. His understanding of audience preferences and production logistics was typically unconventional, resulting in content that probably challenged viewers' expectations in unexpected ways. Transportation services experienced Peter's customer service approach when he worked as an Uber driver. His vehicle, the situation was unconventional, and his interpersonal skills with passengers followed his established pattern of creating memorable experiences for all the wrong reasons. The pharmaceutical industry relied on Peter's expertise when he worked as a pharmacist. His approach to medication distribution and patient consultation demonstrated his unique interpretation of healthcare delivery. Customers probably received more than they bargained for in terms of personalized service. Seasonal employment has provided Peter with opportunities to spread joy as a mall Santa. His interaction with children during the holiday season showcased his gift for making lasting impressions, though not necessarily the kind that parents hope for when they bring their kids to meet Santa. Domestic management became Peter's responsibility when he worked as a house husband. His approach to household organization and family care demonstrated skills that had been hidden beneath years of workplace chaos. Sometimes the right job brings out unexpected competencies, even in the most unlikely candidates. Judicial service elevated Peter to the Supreme Court, where his legal philosophy focused on equality through unconventional means. His approach to constitutional interpretation was characteristically innovative, challenging traditional legal thinking with solutions that probably weren't covered in law school. Specialized services have utilized Peter's unique skill set in various capacities. He's worked as everything from a babysitter to a personal shopper, bringing his distinctive approach to customer service in roles that required sensitivity and attention to detail. His clients probably received more personalized attention than they anticipated. Performance arts have provided Peter with outlets for his creative expression. His musical abilities have earned him income through various venues, from street performance to wedding entertainment. His understanding of audience engagement and musical technique follows his established pattern of prioritizing enthusiasm over conventional skill. The food service industry has experienced Peter's influence in multiple capacities, from restaurant ownership to catering services. His culinary philosophy emphasizes creativity over convention, resulting in dining experiences that challenge customers' expectations about food preparation and presentation. Public safety has relied on Peter's expertise in various specialized roles, from ninja police officer to volunteer emergency responder. His approach to crime prevention and emergency management demonstrates innovative thinking that probably wasn't covered in standard training programs. Media production has benefited from Peter's creative vision in multiple formats, from cartoon development to television production. His understanding of entertainment value and audience engagement follows his characteristic approach of prioritizing memorable experiences over conventional quality standards. As we wrap up this extensive journey through Peter Griffin's career history, it's clear that his professional life has been anything but boring. From safety inspector to Supreme Court justice, from nurse to ninja cop, Peter has approached every job with the same combination of enthusiasm and chaos that defines his character. His work history reads like a collection of workplace disasters, yet somehow he keeps finding new employment opportunities. What makes Peter's career journey so entertaining is his complete lack of awareness about his own limitations. He approaches brain surgery with the same confidence he brings to flipping burgers, and somehow manages to create memorable moments in every position he holds. His employers probably don't forget him quickly, though not necessarily for the reasons they'd prefer. The sheer variety of Peter's employment history suggests either an incredibly diverse skill set or an amazing ability to convince people to hire him, despite obvious red flags. The truth is probably somewhere in between, though the evidence strongly suggests that Peter's interview skills don't accurately represent his job performance capabilities. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, you can rest easy knowing that somewhere in the animated universe, Peter Griffin is probably starting a new job tomorrow, bringing his unique brand of workplace creativity to yet another unsuspecting industry. His career adventures remind us that sometimes the most entertaining stories come from the most unlikely sources, and that competence isn't always required for memorable employment experiences. Sweet dreams, and remember, no matter how chaotic your own work life gets, it's probably more manageable than Peter Griffin's professional journey through the working world of Quahog and beyond. Picture this. It's 2 a.m. You're tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. Your mind is racing with thoughts about tomorrow's responsibilities, that awkward conversation from 3 weeks ago, and whether you left the stove on. What you need isn't another meditation app or white noise machine. You need something perfectly mundane, yet oddly fascinating. You need random Family Guy facts that will occupy just enough of your brain to let sleep creep in without being so exciting that they keep you awake. Tonight we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog, with facts so specific and delightfully pointless that they'll have you drifting off faster than Peter Griffin at a feminist poetry reading. Let's start with something that sounds completely made up but is absolutely real. The chicken fights between Peter Griffin and Ernie the Giant Chicken have collectively lasted over 20 minutes of screen time across all episodes. 20 minutes. That's longer than most sitcom episodes dedicate to their main plot. These epic battles began over something so ridiculously petty that it perfectly encapsulates the show's absurdist humor. An expired coupon. Not a life-changing amount of money, not a family heirloom, but a piece of paper that saves you maybe 50 cents on chicken feed. Yet this trivial dispute has spawned some of the most elaborate and destructive fight sequences in television history. The creators didn't plan for these fights to become a recurring element. The first chicken fight was supposed to be a one-off gag, but audience response was so positive that it became a signature element of the show. Each subsequent battle had to top the previous one in terms of scope and destruction. They've fought in the streets, crashed through buildings, battled in the sky, and even taken their conflict underwater. The animators spend weeks choreographing these sequences, treating them with the same attention to detail that major studios reserve for blockbuster action films. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's production process. Every episode of Family Guy requires approximately 15,000 individual drawings. In the digital age, this seems almost quaint, but the show maintains a hand-drawn aesthetic that demands incredible attention to detail. Each character's movement, each facial expression, each background element starts as a pencil sketch. The animators have developed shortcuts and techniques over the years, but the fundamental process remains surprisingly labor-intensive. The voice actors record their lines before any animation begins, which means the animators have to match the drawings to the vocal performances rather than the other way around. This creates some interesting challenges. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple characters, and he often has conversations with himself during recording sessions. The sound engineers have become experts at seamlessly blending these multi-character performances, creating the illusion that Peter, Brian, and Stewie are actually in the same room talking to each other. Speaking of voices, here's a fact that demonstrates just how integral Seth MacFarlane is to the show's DNA. He voices 4 main characters, plus dozens of recurring characters and one-off personalities. When he temporarily stepped back from the show to focus on other projects, the producers seriously considered ending Family Guy rather than recasting his roles. They eventually found ways to work around his reduced availability, but it highlighted how deeply connected the show is to MacFarlane's specific vocal talents and comedic sensibilities. The show's relationship with censorship has produced some genuinely bizarre situations over the years. There are jokes that were cut from the television broadcast but restored for DVD releases, creating alternate versions of episodes that exist in different formats. Some episodes have different running times, depending on where and how you watch them. The censors have made requests that seem arbitrary to outside observers. Violence is often acceptable, but certain types of language or visual gags get flagged for removal. This has led to some creative workarounds by the writing team. They've developed a sort of code for getting controversial material past the censors. Sometimes they'll include an extremely offensive joke that they know will be rejected, making their actually intended joke seem mild by comparison. It's a psychological negotiation tactic that has become part of their standard writing process. Here's something that sounds like trivia, but actually reveals something profound about how the show is made. The writer's room keeps a collection of rejected joke ideas that they call the too weird pile. These aren't jokes that are too offensive or inappropriate, but rather concepts that are so strange or specific that they don't fit into any episode. Occasionally, they'll build an entire storyline around one of these orphaned ideas, which explains why some episodes feel like fever dreams that shouldn't work but somehow do. The show's approach to celebrity cameos is more strategic than it might appear. When famous people appear as themselves, they're usually playing exaggerated versions of their public personas rather than trying to seem likable or relatable. The writers deliberately lean into whatever characteristic or controversy that celebrity is known for, creating appearances that feel more like roasts than typical guest spots. This approach has occasionally caused problems when celebrities change their minds about how they want to be portrayed, leading to last-minute script changes or even canceled episodes. Family Guy's relationship with its own continuity is fascinatingly inconsistent. The writers will sometimes reference events from episodes that aired years earlier, demonstrating that they do pay attention to their own history. But they'll just as often completely ignore or contradict previously established facts about the characters or their world. This isn't laziness or poor planning, but rather a deliberate choice to prioritize individual episode quality over series-long consistency. The animation team has developed a visual shorthand for different types of scenes that regular viewers might not consciously notice but definitely feel. Flashback sequences use slightly different color palettes and animation techniques. Dream sequences have their own visual language. Even the way characters move changes depending on whether a scene is meant to be realistic or cartoonish within the show's already cartoonish world. Here's a production detail that reveals how much thought goes into seemingly throwaway moments. Background characters and crowd scenes aren't just randomly generated. The animators create specific individuals with their own implied backstories, even though these characters might only appear for a few seconds. They've developed a whole population of Quahog residents who appear in multiple episodes, creating an illusion of a lived-in community, even though most viewers would never consciously recognize these recurring background players. The show's musical numbers require a completely different production pipeline from regular episodes. They start with Seth MacFarlane or other musically inclined staff members creating rough recordings of the songs. Then professional arrangers develop full orchestrations. The voice actors record their vocals to these arrangements. Only after all the music is complete do the animators begin creating visuals to match. This process can take months for a single musical sequence, which explains why these segments often feel more polished and elaborate than the surrounding episode. Family Guy's approach to holiday episodes reveals something interesting about how the writers view their own show. They treat holiday specials as opportunities to experiment with different formats or storytelling techniques. Rather than simply plugging their characters into traditional holiday scenarios, Christmas episodes might be musicals, Halloween episodes might be horror parodies, and so on. This keeps the show from falling into the predictable patterns that plague many long-running series. The show's merchandise presents some unique challenges because of how the characters are designed. Peter Griffin's proportions don't translate well to three-dimensional objects, leading to action figures and toys that look subtly wrong. The merchandising team has had to develop modified character designs specifically for products, creating versions of the characters that maintain their essential appearance while being more practically manufacturable. Here's something that demonstrates the show's attention to detail in unexpected areas. The writers have created complete backstories for characters who have never appeared on screen. They know the names and personalities of Brian's parents, even though this information has never been relevant to any episode. They've developed detailed histories for minor recurring characters that extend far beyond anything that's ever been shown. This background work helps maintain consistency in how these characters behave, even when they're only making brief appearances. The show's relationship with its own spin-offs created some interesting continuity challenges. When the Cleveland show was in production, storylines had to be coordinated between writing teams to ensure that Cleveland's appearances on Family Guy didn't contradict what was happening on his own show. This led to some awkward scheduling situations where episodes had to be rewritten or delayed to maintain consistency across both series. Family Guy's approach to celebrity deaths has evolved over the years in response to changing cultural sensitivities. Early episodes would sometimes include jokes about recently deceased public figures, but the writers now generally avoid this territory. Unless enough time has passed for such references to feel like historical commentary rather than current events humor. This self-imposed guideline has prevented some potentially awkward situations where episodes would have aired shortly after unexpected celebrity deaths. The show's animators have developed specialized techniques for different types of scenes that regular viewers probably don't notice but contribute to the overall viewing experience. Fight scenes use different frame rates and animation principles than dialogue scenes. Fantasy sequences might employ completely different artistic styles. The animators treat each type of scene as requiring its own approach, making Family Guy more visually diverse than many people realize. Here's a fact that illustrates how deeply the show has embedded itself in popular culture. The writers receive hundreds of suggestions from fans every week, ranging from episode ideas to character suggestions to complaints about plot inconsistencies. While they can't use fan-submitted ideas for legal reasons, these communications help them understand how their audience perceives the show and what elements are most popular or problematic. The show's approach to social media and internet culture has changed dramatically over its run. Early episodes barely acknowledge the existence of the internet, while recent seasons treat social media and online culture as fundamental aspects of modern life. The writers have had to learn new forms of humor and reference that didn't exist when the show began, essentially evolving their comedy style to match changing technology and communication patterns. Family Guy's international versions present fascinating translation challenges. Jokes that rely on American cultural references or wordplay often can't be directly translated, leading to completely different jokes in dubbed versions. Some countries have created culturally specific versions of certain episodes, replacing American references with local equivalents. This has resulted in versions of Family Guy that are almost entirely different shows while maintaining the same basic characters and plot lines. The show's writers maintain detailed style guides that specify how each character speaks, what types of references they would make, and how they would react in different situations. These guides help maintain consistency across different writers and ensure that characters don't drift too far from their established personalities. Brian's dialogue, for example, follows specific patterns that reflect his pretentious intellectual aspirations, while Chris's speech patterns reflect his slower mental processing speed. Here's something that reveals the show's commitment to its own absurdist logic. The writers have created internal rules for how the show's universe works that they follow even when these rules are never explicitly stated. They know how long it takes to travel between different locations in Quahog, which characters know each other, and what each character's financial situation is like. This background consistency helps ground even the most ridiculous storylines in something resembling reality. The show's merchandise licensing deals have created some genuinely strange products over the years. There have been Family Guy-themed everything from breakfast cereals to car accessories to wedding decorations. The licensing team has to consider whether each potential product fits with the show's brand, leading to some philosophical discussions about what Family Guy represents as a cultural entity beyond just a television program. Family Guy's approach to controversial topics has become more sophisticated over the years, moving from simple shock value toward more nuanced satirical commentary. The writers now spend considerable time researching topics before writing about them, ensuring that their jokes come from a place of understanding rather than ignorance. This doesn't mean they avoid controversial subjects, but rather that they approach them with more intentionality. The show's animators have developed a visual signature that makes Family Guy immediately recognizable, even in brief clips or promotional materials. This involves not just character design but also choices about color palettes, camera angles, and motion principles. New animators joining the team have to learn these specific techniques to ensure visual consistency across different episodes and seasons. Here's a production detail that most viewers would never think about, but significantly impacts the viewing experience. The show's sound design team creates distinct audio signatures for different characters and locations. Peter's footsteps sound different from Brian's. The Griffin house has its own acoustic characteristics, and even the way doors close varies depending on the context. These subtle audio cues help create the illusion of a consistent physical world, even though everything is animated. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, animators are drawing the next batch of Family Guy episodes, voice actors are recording dialogue for situations that don't exist, and writers are debating whether jokes about topics you've never considered are funny enough to include in a television show. The machinery of entertainment continues turning even while you rest, creating the content that will occupy your mind during tomorrow night's journey toward sleep. Sweet dreams. And remember that in the grand scheme of things, we're all just characters in someone else's animated universe, trying to make sense of the absurd situations we find ourselves in. Did you know that Peter Griffin once spent over 20 minutes trying to remember if he locked his car, only to realize he doesn't actually own a car? Or that there's an episode where he becomes convinced his shadow is following him around? Welcome to the world of Family Guy, where the most bizarre situations somehow become comedy gold. I'm about to share some of the most mind-bending, sleep-inducing facts about this animated chaos that might just surprise you. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind. Did you know that Peter Griffin has died more times than any other main character on Family Guy? We're talking about legitimate deaths here, not just close calls or fake-outs. Throughout the series, Peter's been killed by everything from falling pianos to alien invasions, yet somehow, he always manages to come back in the next scene, like nothing happened. The writers have never officially explained this phenomenon, leading to fan theories that range from Peter being immortal to the entire show taking place in some sort of cartoon purgatory. Here's another weird one that might help you drift off to sleep. Peter's weight has been officially listed as anywhere between 270 pounds to over 400 pounds, depending on which episode guide you're reading. But here's the kicker. In one episode, they actually show Peter stepping on a scale that reads -5 pounds. The joke was that he was so full of hot air that he defied the laws of physics. This kind of absurd humor is exactly what makes Family Guy so uniquely ridiculous. Speaking of Peter's physical characteristics, his age is another mystery that changes depending on who's writing the episode. He's been anywhere from 39 to 45 years old throughout the series. But in one memorable episode, they reveal that Peter doesn't actually know his own birthday. He's been celebrating it on the wrong day for years because he misread his birth certificate. When Lois finally corrects him, Peter insists on having a do-over birthday party, complete with all the presents he should have received on his actual birthday for the past decade. Now here's something that might surprise you about the show's production. The famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken weren't originally supposed to be recurring segments. The first fight scene was meant to be a one-off joke, but it tested so well with audiences that the writers decided to bring it back. These elaborate fight sequences, which can last several minutes and involve massive property damage across multiple city blocks, have become some of the most expensive animated sequences to produce on television. Each chicken fight costs more to animate than entire episodes of some other shows. Let me tell you about Peter's job situation, which is honestly more confusing than quantum physics. Throughout the series, he's worked at a toy factory, a brewery, his own fishing boat business, and even briefly as a bodyguard for a pop star. But here's the thing that'll keep you puzzling as you fall asleep. Sometimes within the same season, the show will contradict itself about where Peter works. In one episode, he'll be complaining about his boss at the brewery, and in the very next episode, he's somehow back at the toy factory with no explanation whatsoever. The Griffin family house itself is another source of endless continuity errors that hardcore fans love to debate. The layout of the house changes constantly throughout the series. Sometimes there are 4 bedrooms upstairs, sometimes 3. The basement has appeared on both the left and right sides of the house in different episodes. Most bizarrely, there was one episode where they showed a second staircase that had never existed before and has never been seen since. It's like the house exists in its own dimension, where architecture is more of a suggestion than a rule. Here's a fact that might make you chuckle as you're trying to fall asleep. Peter Griffin holds the record for the most words spoken per minute in any animated television series. During his fastest rapid-fire dialogue sequence, He spoke over 400 words in 60 seconds. The voice actor, Seth MacFarlane, had to practice that particular monologue for weeks to get it right. And even then, they had to record it in multiple takes and edit them together digitally. The show's relationship with censorship has always been interesting. But did you know that there are entire episodes that have been completely banned from certain countries? Not just edited or censored, but completely prohibited from airing. These episodes aren't necessarily the ones you'd expect either. Sometimes it's because of obscure cultural references that were considered offensive, or because of background details that viewers in certain regions found problematic. There's apparently a whole vault of Family Guy content that most of the world will never see. Peter's relationship with food deserves its own documentary series. Throughout the show, he's eaten everything from expired milk that was older than Meg to a sandwich so large it required a forklift to deliver. But the most impressive feat was when he ate an entire Thanksgiving dinner, including the table it was served on, in under 3 minutes. This wasn't even treated as particularly unusual by his family, who just went ahead and ordered pizza instead. The voice acting for Peter involves more physical comedy than you might expect. Seth MacFarlane actually acts out many of Peter's movements while recording his lines, which is why the character's gestures often seem so natural and expressive. During particularly energetic scenes, MacFarlane has been known to sweat through multiple shirts in a single recording session. He's also injured himself several times while getting too into character, including once throwing out his back during a particularly enthusiastic laugh sequence. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's writing process. Many of Peter's most memorable one-liners were actually improvised during recording sessions. The writers would provide the basic structure of a scene, but they'd leave room for MacFarlane to add his own comedic touches. Some of these improvised moments became so popular with fans that they were later incorporated into the show's official mythology. The Griffin family car has been destroyed and mysteriously repaired more times than any other vehicle in television history. We're talking about complete destruction here. Blown up, crushed by giant robots, eaten by sea monsters, you name it. Yet somehow, it always appears good as new in the next scene. The car itself is supposed to be a mid-'80s sedan, but its exact make and model changes from episode to episode. Sometimes it's a Honda, sometimes it's a Ford, and occasionally it's a completely fictional brand that doesn't exist in real life. Peter's medical history reads like something out of a medical textbook written by someone who's never been to medical school. He's survived diseases that don't exist, undergone surgeries that are physically impossible, and been treated by doctors who clearly got their degrees from the back of a cereal box. In one episode, he's diagnosed with a condition where his bones are apparently made of rubber, which somehow makes him both incredibly flexible and completely indestructible. The show's approach to time and aging is fascinatingly inconsistent. While the Simpson family has remained the same age for decades, the Griffins seem to exist in a temporal bubble where sometimes years pass and sometimes they don't. Stewie has been a baby for over 20 years of real time. But there have been episodes where characters reference events from their past that would require them to have aged significantly. Here's a production detail that might interest you as you're winding down for the night. The animators have developed an entire catalog of Peter's facial expressions that numbers in the thousands. Each expression is carefully categorized by emotion, intensity, and context. There's apparently an expression called Peter confused by technology that gets used at least once per episode, and another one called Peter realizing he's made a terrible mistake. That's practically the show's trademark look. The Griffin family's financial situation is another source of endless mystery. Despite Peter's various job situations and questionable work ethic, the family somehow maintains a middle-class lifestyle in a decent neighborhood. They've been shown to be both desperately broke and surprisingly wealthy, sometimes within the same episode. Peter once claimed to have no money for groceries while simultaneously planning an expensive vacation to Europe. Peter's relationship with technology provides some of the show's most relatable comedy, especially for anyone who's ever struggled with modern gadgets. He's been defeated by everything from automatic doors to digital clocks. There was one memorable episode where he spent the entire runtime trying to figure out how to change the channel on a television remote, only to discover at the end that the TV wasn't even plugged in. The show's animation style has evolved significantly over the years, but Peter's character design has remained remarkably consistent. The animators have stated that his round shape and simple features make him one of the easier characters to draw, which is ironic considering how complex his personality has become over the years. His iconic green pants and white shirt combination was originally chosen because those colors were easy to reproduce consistently in animation. Here's something that might make you smile as you're drifting off. Peter Griffin has inadvertently solved more crimes than most actual detectives on television, not through any kind of investigative skill, mind you, but through sheer dumb luck and his tendency to stumble into situations where criminals just happen to confess everything to him. He's uncovered everything from art theft rings to international espionage operations, usually while just trying to buy a sandwich or find a bathroom. The character's impact on popular culture extends far beyond the show itself. Peter's laugh has been sampled in music tracks. His catchphrases have entered everyday vocabulary, and his image has appeared on everything from t-shirts to coffee mugs. There's even been academic papers written about his role as a representation of American masculinity in the 21st century, which is probably something Peter himself would find hilariously pretentious. Peter's driving skills, or complete lack thereof, deserve special mention. He's been responsible for more animated car accidents than any other cartoon character in history. The Department of Motor Vehicles in the show's universe has apparently given up on revoking his license, instead just accepting that Peter Griffin behind the wheel is simply a force of nature that must be endured. The show's writers have admitted that they sometimes write episodes specifically around Peter's most ridiculous character traits. There are entire plot lines that exist solely because someone in the writer's room wondered what would happen if Peter tried to do something completely ordinary, like go grocery shopping or attend a parent-teacher conference, and inevitably turned it into a disaster of epic proportions. As we wrap up this collection of Family Guy facts, here's one final detail that perfectly captures the show's absurdist spirit. In the show's internal logic, Peter Griffin is simultaneously the most incompetent person alive and somehow capable of surviving situations that would destroy normal human beings. He's a character who can't figure out how to use a can opener but can somehow survive being hit by a train. He's confused by basic mathematics, but has accidentally invented several revolutionary technologies while trying to fix his toaster. These contradictions aren't bugs in the show's writing, they're features. Family Guy exists in a universe where logic is optional and consistency is overrated. Peter Griffin embodies this philosophy perfectly, being both completely relatable and utterly impossible at the same time. Whether that helps you fall asleep or keeps you awake wondering about the nature of animated reality is entirely up to you. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the world of Family Guy, even the most ridiculous facts somehow make perfect sense, which might be the most ridiculous fact of all. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're scrolling through YouTube at 3 in the morning looking for something to help you drift off to dreamland, you've stumbled upon the perfect video. Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre, hilarious, and sometimes completely unhinged world of Family Guy with some truly wild facts that'll either lull you to sleep or keep you wide awake wondering how Seth MacFarlane's mind actually works. So grab your favorite blanket, dim those lights, and let's explore the wonderfully weird universe of Quahog, Rhode Island. Trust me, by the end of this journey through Family Guy's most fascinating secrets, you'll either be peacefully snoozing or have a whole new appreciation for just how crazy this show really gets. Let's start with something that might blow your mind. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? Yeah, you heard that right. The show first got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and Fox thought they were done with the Griffin family forever. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block. The ratings were so incredible that Fox literally had to eat humble pie and bring the show back in 2005. Then, believe it or not, they canceled it again in 2007, only to reverse that decision just months later. Talk about a roller coaster relationship between a network and a show. Speaking of relationships, let's talk about the voice behind our favorite talking baby, Stewie Griffin. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice Stewie, he also voices Brian, Peter, Glenn Quagmire, and several other characters. But here's the kicker. MacFarlane based Stewie's voice on the accent of English actor Rex Harrison, who you might know from the classic musical My Fair Lady. Yeah, that sophisticated, slightly pompous British accent that makes Stewie sound like an evil mastermind. It's straight from a Broadway legend. MacFarlane has said in interviews that he wanted Stewie to sound like an old-school English gentleman, which makes it even funnier when this supposedly refined character is plotting world domination from his crib. Now, if you think the show pushes boundaries on television, you should hear about some of the stuff that never made it to air. The writers and animators have created countless scenes, jokes, and entire storylines that were deemed too controversial even for Family Guy's standards. And considering what does make it onto television, that's really saying something. There's apparently an entire vault of unused content that could probably fill several seasons worth of episodes. Some of these rejected bits have made their way onto DVD releases as deleted scenes, but many remain locked away forever, too wild even for the show known for having no limits. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's production process. Unlike many animated series that plan out entire seasons in advance, Family Guy often operates more like a live-action sitcom. The writers frequently come up with ideas on the spot, and episodes are sometimes completely rewritten just weeks before they're supposed to air. This spontaneous approach explains why the show can feel so fresh and unpredictable, but it also leads to some pretty intense crunch times for the animation team. Imagine trying to animate complex scenes with just days to spare before broadcast. Let's dive into some character secrets that most fans never realize. Brian the dog, everyone's favorite intellectual canine, was originally supposed to be just a regular pet. In the original concept, Brian was going to be a typical dog who couldn't talk and would just bark and fetch like any normal household pet. Seth MacFarlane decided to make him a talking character at the last minute, and thank goodness he did, because Brian's philosophical conversations and sarcastic wit have become some of the show's most memorable moments. It's wild to think that one of the most complex characters almost didn't have a voice at all. The show's animation style has some fascinating secrets too. Those seemingly simple character designs actually take an enormous amount of work to create. Each character has hundreds of different facial expressions and poses that animators can mix and match. Stewie alone has over 300 different mouth positions just for speaking different sounds. The animators have to keep track of all these variations to maintain consistency across episodes. It's like having a massive digital puppet show where every single movement has to be carefully orchestrated. Here's a fact that might make you appreciate the show's music even more. Seth MacFarlane isn't just the creator, writer, and voice actor for multiple characters. He's also a legitimate recording artist who's released several albums of traditional pop standards. His musical background heavily influences the show, which is why you'll notice that Family Guy has more musical numbers than most animated comedies. Those elaborate song and dance sequences aren't just thrown in for laughs. They're crafted by someone who genuinely understands musical theater and classic American songbook traditions. The show's cultural impact goes way beyond just entertainment. Family Guy has actually influenced real-world events and conversations. Politicians have referenced the show in speeches. Academics have written scholarly papers about its social commentary, and it's been credited with introducing younger audiences to cultural references they might never have encountered otherwise. Think about how many classic movies, TV shows, songs, and historical events you first learned about through a Family Guy cutaway gag. The show serves as this weird cultural bridge between different generations of entertainment. Now let's talk about some of the show's most controversial episodes and why they're so memorable. The writers have never shied away from tackling sensitive subjects, and sometimes their approach has sparked genuine debates about comedy, censorship, and social responsibility. Some episodes have been pulled from rotation, others have been edited for different markets, and a few have become legendary among fans, specifically because they pushed things too far. This willingness to court controversy has kept Family Guy relevant for over 2 decades, even as television landscape has changed dramatically around it. The voice acting process for Family Guy is unlike anything you'd expect. Seth MacFarlane often records multiple characters in the same session, essentially having conversations with himself. He'll record Peter's lines, then immediately switch to Brian's voice to respond, then jump to Stewie for the next exchange. Watching him work in the recording booth is apparently like witnessing someone with multiple personality disorder having a very organized conversation with themselves. Other voice actors have said it's both impressive and slightly unsettling to watch. Here's something that connects to the show's longevity. Family Guy has aired over 400 episodes, making it one of the longest-running animated series in television history. To put that in perspective, if you watched every single episode back-to-back, you'd be sitting there for more than 150 hours straight. That's almost a full week of continuous Family Guy content. The show has literally created enough material to entertain someone for an entire week without sleeping, eating, or taking a single break. The show's international versions reveal some fascinating cultural differences. Family Guy is broadcast in dozens of countries, and each version has to navigate different censorship standards and cultural sensitivities. In some countries, entire jokes are replaced with completely different content. In others, characters' names are changed, and certain running gags are modified to make sense to local audiences. There are versions of Family Guy where the cultural references are so different that they're essentially completely different shows with the same characters. Let's explore some behind-the-scenes drama that most fans never hear about. Like any long-running show, Family Guy has had its share of creative disagreements, contract disputes, and personality conflicts. Seth MacFarlane has been very public about his occasional frustrations with the show, even stepping back from day-to-day involvement for several seasons. There have been disputes over storylines, character development, and the general direction of the show. Some former writers and voice actors have shared stories about heated arguments in writers' rooms and recording sessions that had to be stopped because of creative differences. The show's merchandising empire is absolutely massive, but some of the most interesting products never made it to market. There have been proposed Family Guy video games, theme park attractions, and even a planned Broadway musical that would have featured the Griffin family in live-action musical theater. The legal and logistical challenges of adapting animated characters for different mediums have killed dozens of potential projects over the years. Imagine walking through a Family Guy theme park, or watching actors in Peter and Lois costumes singing on Broadway. Here's a production secret that reveals how much work goes into each episode. A single 22-minute episode of Family Guy requires approximately 8 months to complete from initial concept to final broadcast. The process involves dozens of writers, voice actors, animators, sound engineers, and editors. Every single frame is reviewed multiple times. Every joke is analyzed and often rewritten. And every visual gag is carefully planned and executed. What looks like simple animation on screen represents thousands of hours of collaborative creative work. The show's relationship with censorship has created some legendary stories. There are episodes that exist in multiple versions, with different levels of content depending on when and where they're broadcast. The uncensored DVD versions of some episodes contain jokes and scenes that have never been seen on television. Meanwhile, daytime reruns are edited so heavily that some episodes are barely recognizable. The writers have learned to create content in layers, knowing that different versions will need different levels of editing for different audiences. Family Guy's influence on internet culture deserves its own discussion. The show has generated countless memes, viral videos, and online discussions. Certain episodes have become legendary specifically because of how they're shared and referenced online. The show's cutaway gag format translates perfectly to social media, where short, punchy jokes can be easily shared and remixed. Some Family Guy moments have become more famous as internet memes than they ever were as television content. The voice acting talent that has appeared on Family Guy reads like a who's who of entertainment. Celebrities often jump at the chance to appear on the show, sometimes playing themselves, sometimes voicing original characters. The guest star list includes everyone from major Hollywood actors to political figures to professional athletes. Some celebrities have become recurring characters, while others have appeared just once but created memorable moments that fans still talk about years later. Here's something that might change how you watch the show. Many of the seemingly random cutaway gags are actually carefully constructed references to specific movies, TV shows, or historical events. The writers spend considerable time researching these references to make sure they're accurate, even when they're being completely absurd. There are entire databases that catalog every cultural reference in every episode, and the depth of knowledge required to understand all the jokes is honestly staggering. The show's animation has evolved significantly over its run, but not always in ways you might expect. While the overall character designs have remained consistent, the background art, lighting effects, and scene composition have become much more sophisticated. Early episodes look almost primitive compared to recent ones, but the evolution has been so gradual that most viewers don't notice. Comparing the pilot episode to current episodes is like looking at completely different shows that happen to use the same characters. Family Guy's impact on other animated shows cannot be overstated. The success of Family Guy paved the way for countless other adult animated comedies, from American Dad to Rick and Morty to BoJack Horseman. The show proved that animated comedies could tackle adult themes and attract mature audiences, opening up an entire genre that barely existed before. Many current animators and writers cite Family Guy as a direct influence on their work and career choices. The show's approach to storytelling often breaks conventional narrative rules in fascinating ways. Episodes frequently abandon their main plots entirely for extended tangents. Characters regularly break the fourth wall to address the audience directly, and the show often parodies its own format and conventions. This meta approach to comedy requires a level of self-awareness that's rare in television, and it's part of what keeps longtime fans engaged, even after hundreds of episodes. As we wind down this journey through Family Guy's hidden world, it's worth reflecting on how a cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island became such a cultural phenomenon. The show succeeds because it taps into something fundamentally human about finding humor in chaos, about laughing at things that probably shouldn't be funny, and about the strange comfort of familiar characters behaving in completely unpredictable ways. Whether you're drifting off to sleep or wide awake thinking about animated comedy theory, Family Guy continues to surprise, offend, entertain, and occasionally enlighten its audience after more than 20 years on the air. The show's ability to constantly reinvent itself while maintaining its core identity is perhaps the most impressive fact of all. Sweet dreams, and remember, somewhere in Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into trouble that's even weirder than anything we've discussed tonight. The chaos never really stops. And somehow, that's exactly what makes it so perfect for helping restless minds finally find peace. Until next time, sleep tight and don't let the giant chicken nightmares bite. What if I told you that behind the perfect housewife facade lies one of television's most twisted characters? The woman you think you know as the voice of reason in the Griffin household has actually murdered multiple people, cheated on her husband at least 12 times, and may have given birth to a child who isn't even his. This is the untold story of Lois Griffin, and trust me, it's darker than you ever imagined. Most people see Lois as the long-suffering wife who somehow tolerates Peter's antics while keeping their chaotic family together. But that's exactly what she wants you to think. The reality is that Lois Griffin has one of the most disturbing character arcs in animated television, filled with secrets that would make even the most hardened criminal blush. From her privileged upbringing to her descent into madness, every chapter of her life reveals new layers of dysfunction that will completely change how you see this seemingly innocent character. Let me take you back to where it all began. Lois wasn't always a Griffin. She was born Lois Pewterschmidt into one of the most powerful and dysfunctional families on the East Coast. Picture this: a sprawling mansion in Newport, Rhode Island, where money flowed like water, but emotional warmth was as rare as honest politicians. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, built an empire on ruthless business practices, while her mother, Babs, played the role of the perfect trophy wife, both too busy with their own ambitions to give their children the love they desperately needed. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. Lois had a brother named Patrick, and this family secret will haunt you. As a young child, Patrick witnessed something so traumatic involving his mother that it broke his mind completely. Carter's solution wasn't therapy or family healing. He had his own son shipped off to a mental institution and erased from family history like he never existed. This wasn't just neglect. This was calculated, emotional brutality that would set the tone for how this family handled problems, make them disappear. Growing up in this environment, Lois and her sister Carol developed completely different survival mechanisms. Carol became desperate for male attention, rushing into relationship after relationship, collecting divorces like trophies. By the time we meet her, she's been married and divorced 8 times, each failed relationship a symptom of the emotional void their parents created. But Lois chose a different path: rebellion disguised as conformity. As a teenager, Lois discovered a passion for modeling. For once, she had found something that made her feel alive, something that was hers. But when a legitimate modeling contract was offered, Carter crushed her dreams without hesitation. His exact words were chilling. His daughter would not lower herself to such work. This wasn't parental protection. This was control, masked as concern for social status. And this moment planted the first seeds of the resentment that would later explode into her adult dysfunction. College became Lois's escape hatch, but instead of finding freedom, she found chaos. At Kent State University, she threw herself into everything her controlling father had forbidden. She partied with reckless abandon, broke every rule she could find, and made choices that would haunt her for decades. The most shocking of these was starring in an adult film, not for money or fame, but as the ultimate act of rebellion against her family's pristine image. Think about the psychology here. This wasn't some wild phase or momentary lapse in judgment. This was a young woman so damaged by emotional neglect and control that she was willing to do anything to feel like she had agency over her own life. The fact that she shared this secret so casually with a reporter she barely knew tells us everything about her desperate need for authenticity in a life built on lies and appearances. But the real bombshell comes when we examine how she met Peter Griffin. Here's where the story becomes almost too bizarre to believe. Peter wasn't some college boyfriend or family friend. He was literally hired as a pool boy to clean her family's estate. Picture the scene. The refined daughter of a billionaire family falls for a man whose greatest talent is making fart jokes. On the surface, it looks like a classic opposites attract romance. But dig deeper, and you'll see the psychological warfare at play. Lois choosing Peter wasn't love at first sight. It was the nuclear option in her war against her father's expectations. Carter had controlled every aspect of her life, from her career choices to her social circle. So she chose the one person guaranteed to horrify him, a working-class man with zero social graces and fewer brain cells. This wasn't romance. This was revenge, with wedding vows. When Carter discovered their relationship, his reaction was swift and brutal. He had Peter knocked, unconscious and dumped in the middle of the ocean like some kind of mob hit. But Peter survived, and here's where things get interesting. Carter then offered Peter $1 million to walk away forever. Peter's response reveals something crucial about their dynamic. He turned down the money, claiming Lois was worth more to him than cash. But his exact words were telling. He said she was worthless to him, which is why he loved her. This wasn't the romantic declaration it appeared to be. This was two damaged people finding each other through mutual dysfunction. Peter saw in Lois someone who wouldn't judge his failures because she was running from her own. Lois saw in Peter the ultimate weapon against her family's suffocating expectations. Their love story wasn't built on compatibility or shared values. It was built on shared rebellion against the lives they were supposed to live. The cracks in this foundation became obvious almost immediately. When they tried to start fresh, after college, they broke up. Lois got engaged to Tom Tucker, a much more logical choice that her family approved of. But Peter couldn't let go, not because of love, but because losing Lois meant losing his identity as the rebel who stole the rich girl. So he crashed her wedding in a desperate last-ditch effort to reclaim what he saw as his greatest achievement. What happened next reveals the true toxicity of their relationship. Lois was already pregnant with Meg when they eloped, which means their entire marriage was built on necessity rather than choice. She literally couldn't back out even if she wanted to. This detail reframes their entire relationship. Every fight, every moment of dysfunction, every terrible decision can be traced back to this moment when two people trapped themselves in a marriage neither really wanted. Parenthood didn't fix their problems. It amplified them exponentially. Their first instinct as new parents was to abandon Meg at a fire station. When that failed, they took her home to Spooner Street, but the damage was already done. This child represented everything wrong with their relationship. Unplanned, unwanted, and a constant reminder of the life neither had chosen. As more children arrived, Lois's parenting style became increasingly unhinged. With Meg, she started as a protective mother, but gradually became cruel and dismissive. The most heartbreaking example is when Meg pours her heart out, telling Lois she loves her, and Lois can't bring herself to say it back. This isn't just poor parenting. This is emotional abandonment that mirrors her own childhood trauma. But Meg isn't the only victim of Lois's maternal dysfunction. She's physically abused Stewie, getting so desperate for pills that she dunked his head in a toilet to retrieve one that fell in. She ran over him with her car and immediately tried to cover it up, rather than face the consequences. These aren't accidents or momentary lapses. They're patterns of, quote, behavior that reveals someone completely detached from normal parental instincts. Even with Chris, supposedly her favorite, she's done things that cross every line of appropriate motherly behavior. When rumors spread that he was involved with an attractive teacher, instead of shutting down the inappropriate speculation, she confirmed it herself. This isn't protective parenting. This is a woman so desperate for attention that she'll exploit her own children to get it. The drug addiction storyline reveals just how far Lois has fallen from her privileged upbringing. This isn't recreational use or social experimentation. This is full-blown addiction that turns her into a criminal. She starts dealing drugs, becomes a kleptomaniac, and eventually graduates to violent crime. The woman who grew up in mansions is now poisoning baristas and kidnapping innocent people to maintain her position as the best customer at a coffee shop. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Lois's character is her complete moral flexibility. She runs for mayor claiming to fight corruption, then immediately becomes as corrupt as the person she replaced. She allows oil companies to dump waste in the city's water supply for money. This isn't political compromise. This is selling out an entire community for personal gain. Her relationship with violence is equally troubling. She's admitted to killing multiple people, including a waitress on their honeymoon as part of some sick game with Peter. She traumatized Chris by revealing she'd killed someone with her car, then casually mentioned that all mothers have killed someone, as if murder was just another household chore. The pattern becomes clear when you look at her complete story. Every major decision in Lois's life has been driven by one of two motives: rebelling against her family's expectations, or covering up the consequences of previous rebellions. She chose Peter to spite her father. She had children because she was trapped. She became addicted to drugs to cope with her choices. She turned to crime to support her addictions. Each step led inevitably to the next in a downward spiral that shows no signs of stopping. Her infidelity adds another layer to this psychological profile. Lois hasn't just cheated on Peter occasionally. She's been systematically unfaithful throughout their entire marriage. She's had affairs with Bill Clinton, rock stars from the 80s, and even Peter's own half-brother. The most shocking revelation is her admission that Chris might not even be Peter's biological son, the result of an affair with actor Philip Seymour Hoffman. This isn't a woman struggling with temptation. This is someone who views marriage vows as suggestions rather than commitments. Her pattern of cheating reveals someone incapable of genuine intimacy, constantly seeking validation from new partners because she's never resolved the emotional damage from her childhood. The psychological implications become even more disturbing when you consider her relationships with Brian and Quagmire. Both men have been obsessed with her for years, and in alternate timelines, she's married both of them. This suggests that her appeal isn't based on genuine connection, but on some kind of emotional unavailability that draws damaged men to her like moths to a flame. Her bisexual tendencies, while potentially representing healthy sexual exploration, fit the same pattern. She kisses women impulsively, fantasizes about running away with female cashiers, and engages in passionate encounters with friends' wives. But these aren't expressions of genuine sexual identity. They're more rebellion, more ways to shock and transgress against social expectations. As Lois ages, the consequences of her choices begin catching up with her. By her 50th birthday, doctors are warning she might not survive much longer due to the physical toll of her lifestyle and the violence she's experienced. Stewie planted a time bomb in her uterus as an infant, and Chris nearly killed her during childbirth. These details aren't just dark humor. They're metaphors for how her own children have become weapons turned against her, the inevitable result of her toxic parenting. The future episodes show Lois and Peter still together in their retirement home. But this isn't a happy ending. It's two people too damaged and codependent to separate, even when they probably should. Their adult children push them into assisted living, suggesting that even as grown-ups, the Griffin kids can't wait to get their parents out of their lives. But here's what makes Lois truly fascinating as a character. She's not entirely unsympathetic. Every terrible thing she's done can be traced back to the emotional neglect and control she experienced as a child. Her father crushed her dreams and treated her like a possession. Her mother was absent and cold. Her brother was literally erased from family history when he became inconvenient. Is it any wonder she grew up incapable of healthy relationships or appropriate boundaries? The tragedy of Lois Griffin isn't that she became a terrible person. It's that she never had a real chance to become anything else. Every relationship in her life has been transactional or manipulative. She learned early that love comes with conditions and that people will abandon you if you become inconvenient. So she became someone who abandons others first, who cheats before being cheated on, who hurts before being hurt. Her criminal behavior isn't random chaos. It's the logical endpoint of a life spent learning that rules don't apply to people with money and power. Her father built an empire through ruthless business practices and made problems disappear through violence and money. Is it surprising that his daughter grew up thinking murder and corruption were just more extreme versions of normal problem solving? The drug addiction storyline reveals someone desperately trying to numb the pain of a life she never wanted. The cheating shows someone searching for connection she's never experienced. The violent outbursts demonstrate someone who learned early that force and manipulation get better results than honesty and vulnerability. Even her relationship with Peter, dysfunctional as it is, represents her attempt to break free from the toxic patterns of her childhood. She chose someone completely different from her father, someone who couldn't control or manipulate her through money or social pressure. The problem is that she chose someone equally damaged, someone whose emotional instability matched her own. The most disturbing aspect of Lois's story is how it reflects real-world patterns of generational trauma. Children who grow up in emotionally abusive environments often struggle to form healthy relationships as adults. They may seek out partners who replicate familiar patterns of dysfunction because chaos feels like home. They may become abusive parents themselves, not out of malice, but because they never learned healthy parenting models. Lois's story is a masterclass in how privilege can't protect children from emotional damage. All the money in the world couldn't give her what she really needed. Parents who loved her unconditionally and supported her dreams. Instead, she got parents who treated her like a business asset and a social accessory, valued only for how she reflected on their reputation. The brilliance of her character lies in how the show presents her as both victim and villain simultaneously. Yes, she's done terrible things that hurt innocent people. But understanding why she did them doesn't excuse the behavior. It explains how someone becomes capable of such actions. She's a cautionary tale about what happens when children don't receive the emotional foundation they need to become healthy adults. Her relationship with her own children reflects this cycle of dysfunction. She can't give them what she never received herself. Her inability to say "I love you" to Meg isn't just cruelty. It's the echo of parents who never said those words to her. Her physical abuse of Stewie mirrors the emotional violence she experienced growing up. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of Lois's character is how normal she appears on the surface. She's articulate, intelligent, and socially skilled when she needs to be. She can play the role of the concerned mother, the devoted wife, the responsible citizen. This ability to present a functional facade while being completely broken inside makes her more dangerous than someone whose dysfunction is obvious. The show's genius lies in slowly revealing the depths of her damage over time. Early episodes presented her as the reasonable one, the moral center of the family. But as the series progressed, each new revelation stripped away another layer of that facade until we saw the broken person underneath. This isn't character assassination. It's archaeological excavation, uncovering the psychological damage that was always there but carefully hidden. Looking at Lois Griffin's complete story, we see a masterpiece of character development that illustrates how childhood trauma can echo through generations. She's not just a cartoon character making bad choices for laughs. She's a complex psychological portrait of someone whose entire life has been shaped by early emotional wounds that never healed. Her story serves as a dark mirror to the American dream, showing how wealth and privilege can create their own forms of destruction. The Pewterschmidt family had everything money could buy, but nothing that actually mattered. And their daughter grew up to become living proof that you can't buy emotional health or authentic human connection. The most disturbing realization about Lois Griffin is that she's not an anomaly. She's a recognizable type. We all know people who seem to have everything together on the surface, but whose personal lives are complete disasters. We see them in positions of power, making decisions that affect others while being completely incapable of managing their own emotional lives. Lois Griffin's entire story is a cautionary tale about the price of emotional neglect and the generational transmission of trauma. She started as a victim of her parents' dysfunction and became the architect of her children's future therapy bills. Her legacy isn't the crimes she's committed or the people she's hurt. It's the cycle of damage that will likely continue through her own children unless they find ways to break free from the patterns she's established. In the end, Lois Griffin represents one of television's most complex and disturbing character studies. She's simultaneously the victim of generational trauma and the perpetrator of new trauma, a woman whose entire life has been shaped by her unsuccessful attempts to escape the emotional prison her parents built around her childhood. Understanding her story doesn't excuse her actions, but it does explain how someone becomes capable of such systematic dysfunction while maintaining the appearance of normalcy. The brilliance of her character lies not in the shocking things she does, but in how those actions reflect deeper patterns of psychological damage that make perfect sense once you understand where she came from. She's not crazy. She's the logical product of her environment, which makes her story both more tragic and more terrifying than any random acts of villainy could ever be. What if I told you that one cartoon dad has a higher body count than most movie villains? Today we're diving deep into the chaotic world of Peter Griffin and counting every single person this animated maniac has eliminated. Trust me, the numbers are absolutely insane. Most people think Peter Griffin is just a lovable goofball who makes stupid mistakes. But when you actually sit down and track his actions across hundreds of Family Guy episodes, a terrifying pattern emerges. This isn't just some clumsy dad bumbling through life. This is a walking disaster zone who leaves destruction wherever he goes. I spent weeks combing through every Family Guy episode, taking notes, rewinding scenes, and meticulously documenting each incident. What I discovered shocked me. Peter Griffin isn't just accidentally dangerous. He's legitimately one of the most prolific killers in television history. And the worst part? He never faces any real consequences. Let's start from the very beginning with Peter's first confirmed elimination. In only the second episode of the entire series, Peter runs down the Roadrunner from Looney Tunes while driving, just flattens the poor bird completely. When asked if he hit something, Peter casually dismisses it and keeps driving. That casual attitude toward taking a life, it sets the tone for everything that follows. The very next episode, things escalate dramatically. A tour bus pulls up to the Griffin house, and Peter completely loses his mind. He grabs a shotgun and opens fire on the entire vehicle. 3 people eliminated just like that. His reaction to seeing strangers at his door was immediate violence. No questions asked. No attempt at communication. Just grab a weapon and start shooting. Then there's the hospital incident that really showcases Peter's dangerous incompetence. Somehow this man was allowed to work as a doctor, which should have been a red flag for everyone involved. During what appears to be a routine procedure, Peter's negligence directly leads to a patient's death. The fact that he was even permitted near medical equipment shows a serious breakdown in the system. But Peter's killing spree really picks up steam when he temporarily takes over Death's job. With supernatural powers at his disposal, Peter becomes exponentially more dangerous. He kills 2 airline pilots mid-flight simply by touching them. Thousands of passengers could have died if not for quick thinking from another character who managed to land the plane. Peter's reaction to nearly causing a massive aviation disaster? He jokes about needing mittens. The pattern becomes clear early on. Peter has zero regard for human life and even less understanding of consequences. When tasked with simple babysitting duties, he leaves an infant to drown in a bathtub. His parenting instincts are so fundamentally broken that he can't even keep a baby alive for one evening. Speaking of children, Peter's relationship with kids is consistently disturbing. When he briefly works as a nanny dressed up like Mary Poppins, 2 children end up dead and hidden under a bed. These weren't accidents or misunderstandings. Peter's presence in any childcare situation inevitably leads to tragedy. But the really chilling moments come when Peter turns his violence toward his own family. In one episode, his negligence with home repairs leads to carbon monoxide poisoning that kills Lois, Chris, and Meg. Even though they're miraculously fine in the next episode, Peter's actions directly cause their deaths. A husband and father who accidentally kills his entire family should be traumatized for life. Peter just moves on like nothing happened. The mob-style execution of Brian over some leftover food shows Peter's capacity for cold-blooded murder. When his dog eats his chicken and drinks his cream soda, Peter responds with gangster-level violence. The casual way he eliminates a family member over such trivial matters reveals the true depth of his sociopathic tendencies. Peter's parenting philosophy seems to involve extreme violence as conflict resolution. When his daughter faces bullying at school, instead of speaking to teachers or parents, Peter takes matters into his own hands. The bully doesn't survive the encounter. Later, when presenting what he thinks is the bully's head to his son, Peter admits he got the wrong kid entirely. He murdered an innocent deaf child by mistake and shows no remorse whatsoever. The axe murder of Cleveland represents a turning point where Peter's violence becomes increasingly graphic and disturbing. This isn't cartoon slapstick anymore. This is genuine horror movie material. The casual way Peter wields deadly weapons against friends and neighbors shows a complete break from reality and basic human decency. From this point forward, Peter's methods become increasingly brutal, and his body count starts climbing exponentially. The chainsaw massacres alone account for dozens of victims. Peter goes from house to house like a serial killer, methodically eliminating anyone in his path. The fact that he seems to enjoy this level of violence makes it even more disturbing. One of the most senseless killings involves Peter murdering a child just to steal a jet ski. When his family points out they're literally standing next to their boat, Peter ignores them and commits homicide anyway. This isn't about necessity or even twisted logic. This is pure evil masked as comedy. The restaurant incident where Peter kills a woman named Erica while trying to prove his cooking skills demonstrates how his ego and incompetence create deadly combinations. Peter's need to show off constantly puts innocent people in mortal danger. Peter's involvement in sports inevitably leads to casualties. Every athletic activity he participates in somehow results in someone's death. Whether it's shot put, treasure hunting, or any other recreational activity, Peter transforms harmless fun into lethal encounters. The drunk driving incidents reveal another layer of Peter's criminal behavior. He openly admits to calculating exactly how much alcohol he can consume while still being able to drive. This premeditated approach to endangering others shows Peter knows his actions are dangerous, but simply doesn't care about the consequences. The Boston Marathon Massacre stands out as one of Peter's most heinous acts. Running down dozens of innocent runners during a major sporting event crosses the line from accidental violence into mass murder territory. The casualty count from this single incident rivals actual terrorist attacks. Peter's racism leads to deadly encounters as well. His casual bigotry creates situations where innocent people lose their lives simply for existing in Peter's presence. The anthropology store incident perfectly captures how Peter's prejudices fuel his violent tendencies. When Peter briefly becomes death incarnate, his kill count skyrockets through supernatural means. Having the literal power of life and death in Peter's hands is like giving a nuclear weapon to a toddler. The pilots who die simply from Peter's touch represent just the beginning of the carnage. The hospital bombings showcase Peter's evolution into full-scale terrorism. Destroying entire medical facilities because he disagrees with vaccines makes Peter an anti-science extremist willing to commit mass murder for his beliefs. The estimated casualty counts from these attacks reach into the hundreds. Peter's accidental involvement with actual terrorists leads to multiple explosive incidents. His friendship with a terrorist operative results in several bombings throughout the city. Even when Peter tries to do the right thing by helping authorities, he ends up triggering more explosions that kill dozens of innocent people. The Secret Society incident demonstrates Peter's capacity for large-scale destruction. Burning down an entire facility housing historical documents leads to hundreds of deaths. Peter's inability to consider consequences means every action he takes has the potential for massive collateral damage. The presidential fight with Donald Trump represents the peak of Peter's destructive potential. Their brawl triggers nuclear missile launches that devastate multiple population centers. The casualty count from this single incident reaches into the thousands. Peter literally causes acts of war through his inability to control his temper. But none of Peter's individual acts of violence compare to his ongoing feud with Ernie the Giant Chicken. This running conflict has resulted in more deaths and destruction than actual wars. Every encounter between these two characters leaves dozens of innocent bystanders dead. Their first major battle destroys multiple vehicles, causes plane crashes, and brings down entire buildings. The Ferry wheel incident alone accounts for hundreds of casualties, as the massive structure rolls through populated areas. Their fights aren't contained conflicts between two individuals. They're citywide disasters that claim enormous numbers of innocent lives. The cruise ship battle represents the most destructive single incident in their ongoing war. When their fight moves into the engine room, they lose control of a massive passenger vessel that crashes into a major city. The resulting destruction levels multiple city blocks and kills hundreds of people. This single incident qualifies as one of the worst maritime disasters in history. Their time travel battle creates paradoxes that threaten the fabric of reality itself. When Peter and Ernie use time manipulation technology to continue their fight across multiple historical periods, they create cascading effects that alter the course of human history. The scientist who created the time machine becomes an early casualty of their temporal warfare. The NASA facility destruction shows how their conflict has escalated beyond Earth itself. Their space battle crashes back to the planet and destroys an ocean oil rig, adding environmental disaster to their already impressive list of crimes against humanity. The reverse time sequence battle creates some of the most confusing and deadly encounters in their entire conflict. When everything starts happening backwards, the destruction becomes even more widespread and incomprehensible. Plane crashes, building collapses, and mass casualties all blend together in a chaotic symphony of violence. When you calculate the total casualties from just the Peter versus Ernie conflicts, the number reaches nearly 1,500 deaths. This means half of Peter's entire body count comes from a single ongoing dispute that started over an expired coupon. The fact that such trivial origins led to such massive destruction perfectly encapsulates Peter's character. The crossover episode with The Simpsons showcases Peter's ability to bring his destructive tendencies to other fictional universes. His fight with Homer Simpson levels significant portions of Springfield and adds another 100 casualties to his count. Even when visiting other shows, Peter cannot help but create mayhem and death. Throughout all of these incidents, certain patterns emerge that make Peter's behavior even more disturbing. He shows no remorse for any of his actions. He never learns from his mistakes or attempts to modify his behavior. Most importantly, he faces no meaningful consequences for any of his crimes. The legal system in Peter's universe seems completely incapable of holding him accountable. Despite committing mass murder on multiple occasions, Peter continues to walk free and repeat his destructive patterns. This creates a world where violence has no consequences and human life has no value. Peter's family and friends enable his behavior by treating his mass murder sprees as minor inconveniences rather than serious crimes. When someone consistently kills innocent people, the appropriate response is not to laugh it off and wait for the next episode. The normalization of Peter's violence makes everyone around him complicit in his crimes. The media within Peter's world also fails to adequately report on his actions. Despite causing multiple disasters that should dominate news cycles for months, Peter's crimes are quickly forgotten and life returns to normal. This unrealistic portrayal of consequences sends dangerous messages about accountability and justice. When you add up every death directly attributable to Peter Griffin's actions, the final count reaches approximately 2,800 people. This makes him one of the most prolific killers in entertainment history. For context, this body count exceeds many actual historical mass murderers and rivals casualty figures from major military conflicts. The fact that this level of violence is presented as comedy raises serious questions about desensitization to violence in media. When mass murder becomes a punchline, society loses important moral boundaries that separate acceptable behavior from criminal acts. Peter Griffin represents the logical extreme of consequence-free violence in entertainment. His character demonstrates what happens when someone with destructive tendencies faces no accountability for their actions. The result is escalating violence that eventually reaches genocidal proportions. The most disturbing aspect of Peter's character is how his violence is often portrayed as justified or at least understandable. Whether defending his family, pursuing his goals, or simply satisfying his curiosity, Peter's murderous actions are presented within contexts that make them seem reasonable to viewers. This normalization of extreme violence has real-world implications for how audiences process and respond to actual violence in their daily lives. When fictional characters commit mass murder without consequences, it becomes easier to dismiss real violence as less serious than it actually is. The Peter Griffin phenomenon also reveals how comedy can be used to mask serious social problems. By presenting his violent tendencies as humorous character quirks rather than serious mental health issues, the show avoids confronting the deeper implications of his behavior. In conclusion, Peter Griffin's body count of 2,800 people makes him one of the deadliest characters in television history. His casual approach to mass murder, combined with the complete lack of consequences he faces, creates a character who embodies the worst aspects of unchecked violence and social irresponsibility. While Family Guy presents his actions as comedy, the sheer scale of death and destruction he causes reveals a character who belongs in prison rather than primetime television. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel where we dive deep into the most dysfunctional family on television. Today we're talking about something that's been bothering me for years watching Family Guy. Peter Griffin might be an absolute disaster of a human being, but honestly, his wife Lois has pulled some stunts that would make any reasonable person run straight to a divorce lawyer. I'm talking about moments so outrageous, so completely unforgivable, that you'll be questioning how this marriage even survived. We're counting down the 5 most shocking times Peter should have packed his bags and never looked back. Trust me when I say number 1 is going to blow your mind because it involves a certain pop star and some seriously questionable decisions. But before we jump in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because we've got tons more Family Guy content coming your way. Let's kick things off with number 5. And honestly, this one still makes me uncomfortable just thinking about it. Picture this. Lois Griffin, the supposedly devoted wife and mother, decides to have an affair with none other than former President Bill Clinton. Yeah, you heard that right. The President of the United States. Now, I know Family Guy is known for its outrageous storylines, but this one crosses every possible line you can imagine. The whole mess starts when Clinton rolls into Quahog for what's supposed to be an innocent beauty contest judging gig. His presidential limo conveniently breaks down right in front of the Griffin house, and suddenly Peter finds himself starstruck by his new famous friend. At first, it seems harmless enough, just 2 guys hanging out causing minor mischief around town. But then Lois discovers Peter looking absolutely terrible the next morning, and she is not having it, especially when she finds out he brought home a random pig from their adventures. Now, here's where any normal person would just have a conversation with their spouse about boundaries and responsibility. But Lois Griffin is not normal people. Instead of talking to Peter directly, she marches herself over to Clinton's hotel room to give the former president a piece of her mind about corrupting her husband. Big mistake. And I mean astronomically huge mistake, because the next thing you know, she's completely fallen for Clinton's legendary charm. The situation goes from bad to absolutely catastrophic when Peter walks in to find his wife in bed with the president. Can you even imagine that moment? The betrayal, the shock, the complete destruction of everything you thought you knew about your marriage. Peter literally catches them in the act, and Lois has the audacity to come crawling back, begging for forgiveness like this is just some minor marital hiccup. But here's the part that really gets me. Instead of demanding answers or showing any kind of backbone, Peter just accepts her pathetic excuse and even agrees to her twisted proposal that he can sleep with anyone he wants to get even. The whole situation is so messed up that even when Peter chooses to get revenge with Lois's own mother, the moral compass of this family is just completely broken. What makes this even worse is that this isn't just about physical betrayal, it's about the complete lack of respect Lois shows for her marriage and family. She throws away decades of marriage for a quick fling with a politician and somehow expects everything to just go back to normal. Any self-respecting person would have walked away right then and there, but not Peter Griffin. Moving on to number 4, and this one might actually be worse, because it involves someone who should be completely off limits. Meg's teenage boyfriend, Anthony. Now, I know what you're thinking. Meg actually managed to get a boyfriend. That's shocking enough on its own, but what Lois does next is absolutely unforgivable and frankly pretty disturbing. Anthony seems like a decent kid, probably the first normal person to show any interest in Meg, ever. Peter and Lois are initially thrilled that their daughter finally found someone. But then Anthony makes one innocent compliment about Lois looking like a movie star, and suddenly she's acting like a predator stalking her prey. The whole thing starts innocently enough with Lois just feeling flattered by the attention, but then she completely loses her mind and starts fantasizing about this underage kid. We're talking about a grown woman in her 40s getting worked up over a teenage boy who's dating her own daughter. The levels of wrong here are just astronomical, and it gets so much worse. Lois doesn't just fantasize, she takes action. She literally creates a schedule showing when Peter will be out of the house and when she'll be available. She hands this to a minor, along with details about her personal life that no teenager should ever know about. The predatory behavior is so blatant and disturbing that it's honestly hard to watch. When she finally makes her move and tries to seduce Anthony, the kid is surprisingly into it, which somehow makes the whole situation even more disturbing. But of course, Meg walks in at the worst possible moment and catches her own mother trying to hook up with her boyfriend. The emotional damage this causes to Meg is something that family will probably never recover from. The worst part about this whole scenario is how Lois handles getting caught. Instead of taking responsibility for her completely inappropriate behavior, she manipulates the situation to make herself the victim. She tells Peter that he makes her feel old and ugly, essentially blaming him for her decision to prey on a teenager. And Peter, being the spineless disaster that he is, actually apologizes to her, and the whole thing gets swept under the rug like nothing happened. This right here should have been the end of their marriage. There's no coming back from trying to sleep with your daughter's underage boyfriend. The betrayal of trust. The emotional damage to Meg. The complete breakdown of appropriate boundaries. It's all unforgivable. But somehow Peter just lets it slide, and life goes on as normal in the Griffin household. Coming in at number 3, we have the time Lois discovered gambling and literally bet away the family car at a casino. This one starts innocently enough, with the family taking a road trip to help Chris with his Boy Scout troubles. Peter, being Peter, refuses to ask for directions, even when they're clearly lost, and the situation gets worse when he needs to make an emergency bathroom stop at a Native American casino. While Peter handles his business, Lois finds herself with some free time, and that's when she spots the poker machines. Now, for most people, this would be a harmless distraction, maybe lose a few dollars and move on with your day. But Lois Griffin has zero impulse control, and within minutes, she's completely hooked on gambling. The addiction happens so fast, it's actually frightening to watch. One minute she's just curious about the flashing lights and sounds, the next minute she's feeding money into these machines like her life depends on it. Peter literally has to drag her away from the gambling floor when it's time to leave, but the damage is already done. Lois has caught the gambling bug, and it's about to destroy everything. Here's where the story goes from concerning to absolutely insane. While Peter is distracted, Lois manages to lose the family car in a poker game. She literally gambles away their primary means of transportation, stranding the entire family at a casino in the middle of nowhere.
The level of irresponsibility and selfishness it takes to make that kind of decision is just staggering. Peter ends up having to pretend to be Native American and spend a night hungry in the forest just to win back their car through some ridiculous tribal challenge. The fact that he actually pulls this off is a miracle, but that doesn't excuse what Lois did. She put her entire family at risk because she couldn't control herself around some flashing lights and the sound of coins dropping. The gambling addiction reveals something really dark about Lois's character. She's willing to sacrifice her family's security and well-being for the temporary thrill of potentially winning money. This isn't just a momentary lapse in judgment. It's a fundamental character flaw that shows she can't be trusted with important decisions. Any reasonable person would have serious doubts about continuing a marriage with someone who would gamble away the family car on a whim. What makes this even more frustrating is that there are no real consequences for Lois's actions. Peter saves the day, gets the car back, and they all go home like nothing happened. There's no discussion about gambling addiction, no acknowledgement of how her behavior could have left them stranded, no recognition that this kind of impulse control problem might be a serious issue in their marriage. Now we're getting to the really disturbing stuff, with number 2, where Lois reads one book about minimalism and completely loses her mind in the most destructive way possible. This episode perfectly captures how Lois tends to take any new idea and push it to absolutely insane extremes without any regard for how it affects her family. The whole disaster starts when Lois discovers a book about decluttering and minimalism. The basic concept is pretty reasonable: getting rid of unnecessary stuff to focus on what truly brings you joy. Most people would maybe clean out a closet or donate some old clothes, but not Lois Griffin. She decides that minimalism means literally throwing away everything and everyone in her life that doesn't spark immediate happiness. The author of this minimalism book claims to have learned these revolutionary insights by meditating on a bridge in Asia, which should have been a red flag that this isn't exactly scientific advice. But Lois is so desperate to find meaning in her life that she latches onto this philosophy like it's going to solve all her problems. What starts as organizing and decluttering quickly escalates to Lois throwing away family belongings without permission. She's making unilateral decisions about what brings the family joy, completely ignoring everyone else's feelings and attachments to their possessions. The lack of consideration for her family's feelings and the authoritarian way she starts controlling everyone's lives is just incredibly toxic. But then Lois takes it to the ultimate extreme and decides that her own family doesn't bring her enough joy, so she kicks them out of the house. Peter, Chris, Meg, Brian, and Stewie all end up living in a storage unit while Lois enjoys her empty minimalist paradise. Can you imagine throwing your own children out of their home because a self-help book told you to focus on joy? This is abandonment of the highest order. The situation gets even more surreal when Lois decides that she herself is clutter and needs to be thrown away. She literally abandons her family completely, leaving behind only a vague note before disappearing entirely. Her husband and children have no idea where she is or if she's even alive. This level of selfish behavior goes way beyond any normal marital problems. It takes Lois falling into an actual garbage barge and nearly drowning in trash for her to realize that maybe throwing away your entire family wasn't the brilliant idea she thought it was. She comes back home babbling about how garbage is wonderful and everything is garbage, which doesn't exactly inspire confidence that she's learned anything meaningful from this experience. The fact that Peter just welcomes her back after she abandoned the entire family shows an incredible lack of self-respect. Lois literally threw away her marriage and her children because a book told her to focus on joy, and somehow that's just something they all move past, like it was a minor disagreement about dinner plans. Finally, we reach number 1, and this is the most disturbing example of all. Lois has a midlife crisis meltdown and ends up trying to seduce Justin Bieber, who at the time was clearly underage. This isn't just inappropriate behavior, this is straight-up predatory and potentially criminal activity. The whole nightmare begins when Lois is feeling down about getting older, and Peter makes everything worse by reading her a birthday poem that basically lists all the ways she's aged and become less attractive. Now, granted, Peter's poem is incredibly insensitive and hurtful, but that doesn't justify what Lois does next. Instead of having an adult conversation about feeling unappreciated, or seeking therapy, or literally any other healthy coping mechanism, Lois decides to have a complete psychological breakdown. She starts dressing like a teenager and acting like she's in high school again, which is already embarrassing enough for a middle-aged mother. But then, things take a turn into seriously illegal territory. When Justin Bieber comes to town, and Lois becomes obsessed with meeting him. She shows up at his concert acting like a screaming teenage fan, which is cringe-worthy enough when you're watching a grown woman embarrass herself on live television while her family watches in horror. The situation reaches peak disturbing when Lois actually tracks down Bieber's dressing room and tries to seduce him. She bribes a security guard, gets into his private area, and starts making advances on someone who is clearly a minor. The power dynamic here is incredibly disturbing, an adult woman using her age and experience to manipulate a teenage celebrity. When she tells this underage kid to take his pants off, that's when this crosses the line from inappropriate into potentially criminal behavior. This isn't just a midlife crisis. This is predatory behavior that would absolutely result in criminal charges if this happened in real life. The fact that Peter shows up just in time to stop anything from happening doesn't excuse what Lois was attempting to do. What makes this even more infuriating is how the episode handles the aftermath. Peter and Lois have a heart-to-heart conversation where they both admit to having insecurities, and suddenly everything is forgiven. There's no acknowledgement that Lois literally tried to commit a felony or that her behavior was completely unacceptable under any circumstances. This pattern of behavior throughout all these episodes shows that Lois Griffin is fundamentally selfish, manipulative, and completely unable to take responsibility for her actions. Whether she's cheating with presidents, gambling away family property, abandoning her children, or attempting to seduce minors, she always finds a way to make herself the victim and avoid any real consequences. Peter Griffin might be an idiot, but he deserves better than a wife who consistently betrays their marriage vows, endangers their family, and commits potentially criminal acts whenever she feels a little bit unhappy with her life. Any of these incidents individually would be grounds for divorce, but all of them together paint a picture of someone who is completely unfit to be a wife and mother. The most frustrating part is that Family Guy treats all of this like it's just harmless comedy, when in reality, these behaviors would destroy any real family. Lois Griffin represents the worst possible partner. Someone who takes no responsibility, lies, manipulates, and puts her own selfish desires above the safety and well-being of her family. So there you have it, folks. 5 times when Peter Griffin should have absolutely divorced Lois and never looked back. From presidential affairs to attempted felonies, this woman has done things that would end any normal marriage immediately. Let me know in the comments which one of these shocked you the most, and whether you think there are any other Lois moments that deserve to be on this list. Don't forget to smash that like button if you enjoyed this deep dive into the Griffin family dysfunction, and subscribe for more Family Guy content. We've got tons more episodes to break down, and trust me, there's no shortage of material when it comes to this completely insane cartoon family. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.